Welcome to Pitching Pixels. My name is Tennyson E. Stead. This is Greg Schwartz, and this is a weekly show where we get on and we discuss, as screenwriters, the work of breaking down a given piece of interactive entertainment. And by the way, Ippy Looney has requested that we do at some point Oregon Trail.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
We do a piece of interactive entertainment as basically in a development meeting as film or television. So we break down how it would work and what makes it work and where to find the cinematic story. Cinematic story meaning something different oftentimes than what people think it means. It's not about showing, not telling. There's a lot of other stuff, and we always get into it, so I won't spoil that. But to introduce myself, my name's Tennyson E. Stead. I'm the creator of I'm a screenwriter, I'm a script doctor, and I'm the creator of Jump Rangers. This is what this channel is about. Jump Rangers is an interactive storytelling world and a tabletop role-playing game at the moment about kid space commandos trying to find a place for humanity among the stars after Earth was invaded by an alien dinosaur empire. The only way for us to survive in the face of these giant motherships wiping us off the planet was to sneak aboard their ships and live in the dark little corners. And we've kind of colonized the galaxy like the pests that we are, trying to survive. And while the grown-ups are living or hanging on to what they can, the kids are out there sabotaging alien extermination efforts and trying to find a future for humanity, trying to retake Earth, and trying to find new places for people to live and all these things. These are the heroes of our world. We call them Jump Rangers. So that's what I'm doing here. Greg, would you like to introduce yourself and tell everybody what's going on and where to find you?
Hello, everyone. My name is Greg Schwartz. I am a writer, director, producer, stuntman, actor, editor, all that stuff. As we all like, when you're a filmmaker in the early days, you do 20 or 30 jobs kind of thing. I'm in development on a coming of age dramatic feature right now. It's going very well. It's kind of generating a little bit of buzz. I can be found on Instagram at Ninja Bicycle. My production company is Mighty Fox Productions. You can find me there. And before we get started today, I do just want to say that I love your shirt. And I totally know that that's a Newberry Comics shirt because, I'm from the Northeast and you're from the Northeast. But yeah, it's a Newberry Comics shirt. And so big fan of just like getting that.
That New England.
Yeah.
So Greg and I met because of script consultation work. And the gist of it is that we both went to UMass. We're both from New England. And the funny thing about sort of my life here in California is that most of the people that I know here, with one or two big exceptions, don't really understand that world and feel, as many people do, uncomfortable dealing with that world until they start getting to know folks, until they start seeing, but it has been consistently, my show family from New England that has been there and stuck it out through the long haul, and I'm grateful for that. So.
Hey man, I live here still. I don't want to I really like where I live, so
with one or two huge exceptions, by the way. There's other people who don't let me leave people out.
Right.
But anyway, that's a little piece of Greg in my backstory that other people might not be aware of.
I'm excited to talk about Civilization.
We're doing Civilization today, which is if anyone, we're talking about the the strategy game.
Sid Meier's Civilization, right?
Yes,
That's what we're talking about.
That's correct.
And I was so excited when this was like what you were like, this is what I want to do next week, because I have no clue how to even begin turning this into a movie. I mean, I tell you, we kind of spitball some just really simple ideas, and I was like, as a writer, I think that you can, in a sense, break down any movie that has action in it into one of two categories, which is are they going to win? They being our heroes kind of thing, or that's not a question. We know they're going to win, but it's how are they going to win?
Right.
And so I think a kind of contemporary examples of that is Breaking Bad is a very good how are they going to win narrative. That is kind of, I feel, more of an anti-hero thing.
Yes.
because I don't know, it's just like bad guy. It's like if there is an expectation of winning, and we always know they're going to win, it's almost like they've got to be a bad guy kind of thing.
Yes.
Whereas like how are they going, or are they going to win? In just very simple layman's terms, that could be like Queen's Gambit, right? Like she's extremely good, but we don't actually know if she's going to win the game. Maybe there is a plot reversal. Maybe she loses or something like that. But like in Breaking Bad,
let me ask you this.
clearly Walt is just going to win.
Are you a big Queen's Gambit fan? Because
huge Queen's Gambit fan.
Okay.
Huge Queen's Gambit. I think the script. I think the script is great. Maybe not like outright like the best screenplays I've ever read in my life, but I do think the scripts are good. But for me, Queen's Gambit is like some of the best cinematography I have ever seen in my life.
Okay.
And it's just it is
great performance.
It's so great performance, great acting, great production and set design, incredible coloring in post, incredible, like look, the VFX chessboard on the ceiling, like that's cool as hell. I don't think that's actually as difficult as a lot of people might perceive it to be. I mean, if you understand how to like render 3D assets in like Maya, the motion and creating shadow. I mean, like I have created some kind of like rudimentary 3D graphics myself. I did that for the sizzle reel actually of the big development package I put together last year for a different project. It's like I think if I knew how to make the assets, I could even be able to do stuff like, because I have quite a bit of experience with After Effects, but it's still like not to take away what they're doing, incredible.
But it's the simplicity of the production as its strength. At the end of the day, is what. It's not. We're not giving it the same kind of credit that you would give the Last Airbender show. It's not that. It's not
right.
We're not talking about production on that level. We're talking about the fundamentals.
You kind of had you kind of almost had like this little bit of a reaction to when I started talking about this. Are you not a fan of the writing?
No. Well, let me not disparage.
Right.
Like
we don't disparage, but
I will say my wife Evan is a huge, like, we are in this house extremely autistic, and every so often Evan finds a show or a movie that gets watched into the ground. Let me just ask, do you know, Evan, how many times you've seen Queen's Gambit? Have you kept a tally? 148 times Evan has watched the entire series.
That is more than me. I'm probably up around 40 or 50 right now.
Greg's at 40 or 50. That's where our new dog got her name. Gambit.
No, but I'm a big fan. But I do think that is way more of like a will they win story rather than a how they win story. And so getting back to the topic at hand with Civilization. The only way that it makes
Evan
sense
says you have
to
some
me.
catching up to do. Evan just wanted to get that last word.
It's fine. It's fine.
So
that's fine.
So here's
I'm not here trying to say I'm a bigger Queen's Gambit fan. I'm not. No. I will yield that.
Yeah. I need to get you two playing chess because I am becoming useless as a chess partner.
You're becoming what?
Useless as a chess partner. We need to make that happen at some point. But so let's talk about Civilization. I have two thoughts.
Yeah.
I have two thoughts. So understanding cinematic action as I do, I end up, as you can imagine, dwelling on films that I love and that I find problematic. I end up sometimes rationalizing, but sometimes those efforts to rationalize reveal truths, not necessarily about the film, but about how the process works. Maybe I find something that I think works, and maybe it does, and maybe it doesn't. But the truth is, it can work that way.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. So even if the film that I'm drilling into my head isn't one of those movies, so I struggle with 2001, A Space Odyssey.
A Space Odyssey.
Yes.
That was, I believe, my father's favorite movie of all time.
I'm not shocked to hear it, and I have seen that film at least a couple hundred times, at least.
I could never really get into it. Now, granted, I watched it for the first time as like a child.
Yes.
And at child brain, that's not really a movie for child brain.
You would be unsurprised to find watched the shit out of that movie when I was a child. I watched it again and again and again and again. And
Yeah, you and my father would have gotten along really well, I
It
think.
seems like that might be the case.
Mm-hmm.
But, but, and this is where the movie kind of works and yet doesn't work. Okay? The movie is about humanity looking for answers and trying to evolve.
Sure.
The problem is that it was written by a novelist.
Oh, wait. So to be clear, it wasn't already a book.
Nope. It became a book after the fact, and then the
Ah.
sequels were all books. But it was written by Arthur C. Clarke in collaboration with with Stanley Kubrick as a
Yeah, I
filmmaker.
didn't know that.
And because Stanley was working with Doug Trumbull, I think, and
Okay.
who went on to do Star Wars famously, of course,
Right.
and was really interested in the possibilities, and he went and hired a science fiction author that he respected and loved to help him bring that potentiality to life. He needed a story, and he found an author to write it. So the problem with, and this is going to sound antithetical, right? It's and I don't know how that's antithematic. No,
Antithetical
anti.
with a T.
Even though it's,
Hmm.
or no, I'm thinking of the word
Yeah.
anathema. I'm thinking of the word anathema.
Oh,
Anathema.
anathema. Oh, anathema.
But
Okay. Yeah.
it's going to sound in that vein.
Anathemic. Yeah.
Anathemic.
Anathemic, I
Thank you
think.
very much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Abulini. This is my coffee.
It's-
So
that is like the one advantage of being a former novelist is that like my actual word vocabulary is outrageous.
it absolutely is. So um, the problem with 2001 is the monolith. It is the problem.
I never followed it. I was just like I don't understand the symbolism here.
The monolith is a Deus ex machina to provide the answers that humanity is looking for. Like
Sure.
that's what it is. It's
Yeah. I mean.
humanity is looking for evolution, and the monolith is evolution in a box.
Yeah. All right.
Like
Yeah.
so, they don't have to look
Now
at.
remember, it's like I haven't watched the movie too many times. And the first time I watched it again, I was probably like 8
So
or something like
it
that.
begins, of course, with the apes looking for like a way to.
Well, it begins with the greatest musical intro of all time, is what it does.
But let's put that aside. Let's talk about the screenplay.
Sure,
Like
sure.
because we're talking about development here. It begins with
Yeah.
the apes struggling to overcome the challenges of living in a harsh environment and limited water supply, and so you have two ape tribes trying to claim the same water supply. And neither of them knows exactly what to do. They're trying to force each other away using very rudimentary methods, and then eventually one of them finds the monolith and discovers tools. Like
Okay.
and picks up a bone and uses the bone to hit people and hurts everybody. And then eventually the ape takes the watering hole by force and throws the bone into the air, and the bone turns into a spaceship, and we know that tools have evolved. Humanity is on
Yeah, this is. I vaguely recall all of this. Yes.
so humanity is still looking to fulfill their potential. This is still their goal. Only now they have a base on the moon, and they are trying to reach for the stars, obviously, and they're building the civilization, and then the monolith gets excavated on the moon and leads them to Jupiter. And so you have Dr. Floyd organizing this mission, and then you have finally Bowman on the mission on Discovery with Hal and the other crew members, Frank, Poole, and one other, um, investigating the monolith in Jupiter, and the monolith is leading them away from Earth. The monolith is leading them to the fulfillment of their potential. And eventually, Dave Bowman goes into the monolith and becomes the man of eternity, and there we are. Like, the problem is that the monolith is doing the heavy lifting.
Right.
Like,
Yeah. It's well, there's a. Is it called a MacGuffin? Is that what it is? Is that the term?
well, a MacGuffin is a thing that everybody's after. It's like the thing in the suitcase,
Right.
which is fine. MacGuffins are not necessarily bad because a MacGuffin can just be something you're stealing, which it was in Pulp Fiction.
Right. Yeah.
Like, and the
Like Ocean's 12, right?
yes, and the stealing is a thing that you're doing,
Mm-hmm.
and that's great. Like,
Right. Okay. Yeah. This is they're all after it, but it's just kind of
it is It is
It
a
just is.
it's a writing it's a solution to their problem at any given stage.
Right.
And that's the problem with the script. Now,
Yeah.
like the action is still there. So it is a problem to a large but also contained degree. Like it could be such a better movie, and yet it is the movie it is. And we love it for the
Right.
movie it is. So
Yeah.
whatever. But um this civilization is an opportunity to take the monolith away
Right.
and to deal with the efforts of humanity to realize humanity's potential, each in their own way, at various stages in history. So
So here's my
you've
question,
got people
right?
passing batons. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. And this is kind of like
This is a
the
bigger movie
thing.
than the game. That's my problem. This is actually a better movie than the game is.
Well, look, I think the game is great. I just, how do you find a protagonist in all of this? And
Humanity, and
when I say that,
this is the this is
right, well, so I figured that where you're going with this is that the protagonist is humanity.
correct.
Um, but I can't. I have to think about this not just with writer brain, but also with like producer and director brain.
Hmm.
And I'm just like, how do you get an audience to care about humanity as a species and as a no pun intended civilization when it's the protagonist is so generalized like that? Like, how are they going to emotionally find connections
I think this is where
to the stories?
I think this is where we have the movie versus TV conversation.
Okay.
I think that I think that we're not going to be spending a lot of time with these characters if we do it as a movie, and that can be potentially interesting.
So
But
you see it almost more as like an anthology.
yep,
Now
and
I've heard numerous times in my career, which let's be fair, my career has been significantly shorter than yours has, but like anthologies generally are not very well received.
well, they're also okay. Let's talk about this for a second. This is a
Sure,
great subject to get into. Yes,
sure.
that's true. Okay.
Like
Yes.
the like there are of course there are always examples like the kind of the modern day example is like American Horror Story.
Hmm.
But even with American Horror Story, it's a seasonal thing, right? Like
Yes.
it is an anthology, but it's seasonally an anthology rather than episodically an anthology.
Okay.
So, is Civilization
A seasonal
if you
anthology.
if you start pitching it as a seasonal anthology, now like my antenna starts going like maybe all right, tell me more kind of thing.
So that's a concept that I have arrived at before. I have my first tabletop role playing game was, as we've discussed, a time travel game called Restoration,
Right.
which is about an organization of time travelers working. It's time commandos and scientists and this and that trying to change the future to ensure humanity's survival because we are inherently programmed to self-destroy. Like we will we will screw it up, and I try not to drop f-bombs on this channel. But the restoration is out there tweaking history at various points to try to.
Yes, I remember this conversation now. I was racking my brains. Wait a minute, we talked about this at some point. I know we did. Now I remember.
So there's all
Yes.
these restorers out there on missions to change history in order to create a later future for humanity with every mission. Now,
Right.
of course, I love science fiction, paramilitary stuff. I love it. I can't ever deny that. And I'll give up the propaganda, but I can't give up my science fiction. Like I can't do it.
I know.
So I've had plenty of conversations and thoughts about, and the first screenplay that I ever wrote actually was a restoration feature. It was because some other writer was like, "Hey, can I license this?" And I was like, "No."
Hmm. Right.
And so I wrote it myself because I figured if I'm not gonna, I have to do something with it. So
Yeah. Should you have sold it in hindsight?
no,
Okay.
restoration. Where at some point you and I are gonna circle back because I know restoration is also the kind of brain candy that you love, and like it's just angry enough. Like it's just
Sure.
like Jump Rangers. I know you appreciate. You're never gonna love Jump Rangers because it's too It's too
Well,
like
yeah, kids media is not where my heart is,
it isn't.
right? Like, and I'm not. This is in no way disparaging kids media. I think kids media is absolutely critical and important, and definitely needs to exist.
You are a
It's just that's
Pokemon fan. You are actually a
right.
Pokemon fan.
Yeah, well, I'm not as much of a fan as as I used to be, but like I have the thing about Pokemon that I have a great appreciation for is the art of it,
Yeah.
right? Like it is the ways in which the things are visually expressed.
When Magic the Gathering
And
came out, it blew my mind that was a thing. It blew
yeah,
my mind.
MTG was really good. I'm not gonna really get into MTG. You know that I played the game very competitively for a number of years back when I was a much younger person. Um, but yeah, no, kids media is super important. It's just like the telling of the stories like inherently has to be kind of simplified to a degree because it is. Again, it has to be resonant with brains that are not fully
It has
developed.
to be emotionally crisp in the sense that you
Yes.
like it, and that's what it comes down to. It has to be pulpy in a way that makes it emotionally accessible. You have to be
Right. Yeah.
willing to play fast and loose with emotional consequences, even if you're dealing with the emotional. And it's okay to say, "Hey, I'm still hurt from that thing we did a while back." That's okay to say in a kids show, like,
Right.
but you have to bring it
Yeah,
up.
you can be super on the nose and stuff like that, and that, but that's okay. It's just that's not my style. Like I love intricate, complex subtext, and weaving, intraweaving thematic elements and stuff. And that's not kids stuff. It's just
There's gonna come a day.
I love complexity of puzzle.
There's gonna come a day when Federico and I have reached a homeostasis with Jump Rangers.
Yeah.
And and I know Federico's got stuff he wants to work on, and for me the next thing um will be restoration, and that will be a great opportunity to bring you in, and you will have a chance to work with Federico because he's fun and he's wonderful, and
Dope.
his whole thing is like he brings a Brazilian sense of emotionality to design that I had never connected to emotionally before I started working with him. So he's got that matrix sense of organic um like intent behind certain things. One of the things that we started working with, for example, just to give you an example with Jump Rangers, was that I had named all of the Terran machines after. I lean on mythology kind of heavily because I know kids like mythology, so I just went for it. Like, and
Sure.
so
All that's the whole Percy Jackson thing.
the Pegasus is the Terran starfighter. The
Sure.
Hercules is the transforming mech. And we started
I mean, what
talking.
the first pilot I ever wrote, sci-fi pilot, was Project Orion. Like,
Yep.
I'm right there with you.
So we were talking about this stuff, and Federico was showing me these designs that were a little more brutalistic, but also a little bit more flowy than I
Like
was
artistic designs, like
yeah,
concept designs.
for concept designs for the Pegasus in particular. And I'm like, I
Okay.
don't understand why we're doing this, right? And he said,
hmm
because it's a horse.
Oh well, yeah, yeah. I
And
mean,
I was
that's
like,
like
and so he was absolutely right. And so the Pegasus has this great blunt downward facing nose, kind of like the Nox in Star Citizen, if you've seen it, and these gorgeous wings that move very.
oh
And it,
wait, isn't there a Star Trek ship that's a lot is it a Vulcan ship that's like very similar, like kind of like that like angular downturned nose kind of thing?
the Romulans have a beak,
Romulans, yes, Romulans. That's it. Yeah.
but it's more, but it's got more. It sticks out on the top more, so it comes.
No,
It's a
yeah,
Mustang. It's a
no.
Mustang.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I understand, but similar, just like
but it's got that.
tonally a little bit.
It is.
Yeah,
It's got that
yeah,
charging horse feel to it, and I was like, of
yeah.
course. And so we started talking about the Herc and all these other things, and it all started falling into place for me in ways that I just. And when he
This
gets
is
this,
I love production design
it's
so much.
when it
Because
comes.
I just quickly like talking about Queen's Gambit, like
Yeah,
the wardrobes that Anya Taylor Joy had in some of those, where it's like very early on she is dressed like she's all dressed, and then Borgov, he's the Black King, he's always dressed in like these very form fitting like rigid black suits, and at the very end when she wins, right, she's the White Queen now, and she's walking around and it's they dressed up like chess pieces. It's great.
yep. So so at any rate, restoration is going to be fun because he's going to take that sense, but it's going to be so dialed back in restoration because restoration is so procedural, so deeply
Right.
like that he's going to wind up making design choices that nobody sees coming, but that wind up feel completely in that like procedural tone. And that's something I think the Matrix did so beautifully that that those the Nebuchadnezzar feels like it was anyway. I think that's going to be a great thing to do. But the point is that when we started working on that show and thinking of that show, I was like, each mission needs to be a season. We need a team of restorers to go into one time period so that we can get to know the characters in the time periods. We have time to do all the procedural espionage and
Yeah.
spycraft. Like,
So and so this was actually my concept for the Archon's Legacy, which was my big action fantasy limited series that I did development on last year. The way I had seen, now I wasn't planning on spanning, epochs kind of thing
yes.
in my show. But it was going to be more of a generational thing where like, it's probably like one
Vikings.
season I haven't seen Vikings. It is on my watch list. So what was the show what was it called? With what's his face? The unification of England, Last Kingdom. And I'm a big fan of The Last Kingdom. I actually haven't watched the final season of it, and then I haven't seen the movie. But yeah, Uhtred, son of Uhtred. Like those. Uhtred is always the main character. But yeah. So you were talking about Vikings. I haven't seen Vikings.
It doesn't do it every season, but they switch generations like a couple of times in the story, and it works.
The reason for me is that I still need, for me, just like as a creator, I need to be able to see some kind of through line.
Yes.
I can't have the things just be totally disjointed.
No.
Kind of thing. And so like even with Civilization, I don't actually see that as a potential problem with Civilization, even though we would kind of be, likely be jumping around through the epochs kind of thing. Epics. I don't know how people
here's what I think. Here's what ties it together. So Civilization is all about tech trees. And
well, it can be. It doesn't have to. You can try to win early on just military might kind of thing. As a game. I'm talking about as a game. I'm not talking about as a movie.
No, this is value. This is valuable conversation because to me, I'm a base builder, so it always has been about tech trees, and it's always been about tech tree racing.
That is also my preference, right? Because I think that there's an art form in like in trying to cultivate strategy through more than just violence kind of thing. However, that said, that doesn't mean like there are very viable strategies in the game of Civilization that involve, winning early. I mean, look, I don't how heavily did you play the game kind of thing? Were you a very big Civilization player?
I was in boarding school when it came out.
Okay.
So there was
go ahead.
exchange. So like we would like certain people would have certain machines and certain games, and we would go hang out with people to play with them. So like I would play Wing Commander on my roommate's computer. I would play Civilization on someone else's computer, and then I would play X-Wing and TIE Fighter on someone else's computer. Like
right.
My friend Justin had Freelancer my senior year, so I would go over to Justin's room and hang out and play. I guess that was junior year, but still.
So, and what I'm getting, so but you've played Civilization, like you're familiar with it, and so what was it in the beginning? You pick your leader, and your leader is kind of the your faction, and every faction has its own like kind of trait bonus.
Yes,
kind of right. So there was and I actually exploited this strategy a lot when I was playing a lot. I think I was a Civ 4 player essentially. Like I think I basically was just always playing 4.
Oh, I was original Civilization.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I was alive when it came out, but I never got into it until really I want to say like Civilization 4.
It was the concept. It was the concept that hooked everybody when it first came out. It was like the whole of history is in a game. Like,
there's like a board game called Diplomacy that's like it, right? Kind of, I want to say. But so I was, my knowledge of the game comes from 4, and especially in 4, I don't remember the Incan leader's name, but if you picked the Incans as your starting, I don't want to say race because it's a political word, but like your faction, your starting faction.
Let's say nation.
Your nation, right? The national like trait bonus was like the starting unit, like that base like warrior unit was like twice as powerful, kind of thing. And so because you start the game with one warrior unit and 1 settler unit. There was this strategy where you settle as quickly as you can, and your warrior doesn't garrison. Your warrior is out looking for another nation immediately, because if you encounter them,
you can beat them.
As long as they don't have like archers defending, which they would have had to build or whatever it is. I guess it would be build archers without knowledge that there's someone out there looking to kind of take advantage, which is that's not an easy thing to do in the earliest part of the games. You're trying to build mills and granaries and stuff like that to kind of get production going. You could easily take a second starter city. And then you have 2 starter cities, and the game changes way big, okay? Because you've eliminated an opponent in the first few turns of the game, kind of thing.
Yep.
And that is a very viable strategy. So what were all the victories? Because I remember there being 3, but I can't remember. There was the tech victory, which is the space race, and then there was the military. There was the domination victory, which is you conquer the world. And then maybe I don't remember if there was. I thought there was a 3rd victory too, but maybe there was. I think there was maybe a diplomatic victory. I think there was
maybe there was a way to forge alliances or something along.
I think where the end is you haven't achieved the tech tree, but you've established peace among the world, kind of thing. I think that's also a victory. I think there is a diplomatic victory, but I don't know if what is it? Is it?
So here's what I see. Here's what I see.
Do we just ignore all of the I guess let me are we ignoring all of the victories?
No.
Just to focus on one, or is it maybe we focus on a specific victory per storyline kind of thing? Or I don't know. He's tell me what you think.
Well, first of all, there needs to be a late game,
Clearly.
So we can't do civilization and just bum rush. So that's not going to work. So
I mean, that could be the efforts of one faction in a season kind of thing.
Here's what I think. Most of the encounters in civilization are about you and one other nation, typically.
In the early game, for sure. Yeah.
And most of the time, your goal is to reach a certain point in your technological development before the nation that you're communicating with, either to whatever end. Right? So you have 2 nations at any given point struggling to achieve X. And that becomes...
Is it always... But is it X, though? Because sometimes one is going after X and the other is going after Y, kind of thing.
Sure, but even if that's the case... it's because they are aware of one another and they are trying to harness certain resources.
They're trying to gain an advantage in some way. Yes.
And they're gaining an advantage in order to inevitably provide themselves with the upper hand in a conflict. They are trying to secure their position over, and so the X isn't necessarily just that place in the tech tree. The X is whatever they're contesting, whether it's the natural resources of the area.
I was gonna say it could easily be a natural resource,
and that natural resource doesn't need to be subtle. It could be the Atlantic Ocean, could be the natural domain over whatever.
Resource management is a huge part of the game. So
it is.
Yeah.
So you have, on the one hand, these highly aspirational themes and these highly aspirational people trying to do something that no one's ever done before. And on the other hand, you have a political pressure cooker of these 2 nations trying to compete in order to accomplish their goal. And inevitably, the way in which that goal is accomplished inevitably thwarts in some way both the peace process and sustainability and becomes a springboard into the next stage of development. So there is systems of power and systems of environmental exploitation grow.
I do have some contextual questions about all of this still.
Yes.
Which is Are we superimposing this over human history, which I think would be
Yes.
initially I think that would be an error, but I'm open to being, convinced otherwise.
I
Um
think we should, because otherwise it will become caricature.
Here's my only uh qualm,
Hmm.
I guess, with superimposing it over human history is the fact that we're not changing human history. So the conclusion is kind of foregone.
I think we move past. I think the point. I think the point of. I think that to some extent, Sid Meier created civilization
Mhm.
for the same reason that the Parker brothers created Monopoly. I
Hmm.
think that there is an element of satire and an element of cautionary tale. I think that I think the point of civilization is no matter who the players are, like no
It
matter
ends up the same.
we end up making the same mistakes. Like we end up like you can do this, you can do that, but here's where the game goes.
Yeah, but also like, there aren't I don't come across too many games of Civilization where like people actually detonate nuclear weapons kind of thing.
No,
Like there are lots of consequences in the game for doing that. Whereas like if you think about it in actual history, there weren't really too many consequences
until
for the
now.
US. Well, I mean directly. I'm not talking about indirectly, but like there were no direct consequences for the US in dropping the bombs on Japan, kind of thing.
Right.
Because it was the only country in the world with the technology at the time. So there was no recourse because like I mean the US was kind of bluffing a bit because that was all the US had. The US only had the two,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so had anyone decided to counterattack in that moment, there might have been an issue, but no one was willing to risk it because no one knew that the US only had the two, kind
Mhm.
of thing.
Mhm.
So there wasn't really any initial what I should say is there were no reprisals. That's the right way to say it.
Right.
There were no reprisals, whereas in Civilization there were reprisals. Like
I think that that is the end of a season. I think that the end of World War II is the end of a season, and the Cold War is the beginning of another.
and I'm okay with that, but I guess my question then is at a certain point, doesn't it stop being a an adaptation of Civilization and it's really just more of like a docudrama of history?
I I I mean,
And that's part of my difficulty in all of this, which is that like Civilization as a game is I think one of the reasons why it is so popular and always has been so popular is because it enables the players to rewrite history to a degree, to their own kind of the way they would want it, whether or not they win or not. They get to kind of enforce like their own will on history.
okay.
And so and again, I'm not saying that like an adaptation of it should be one way or another. I'm still like I don't know how this works.
So
And I'm not
okay, so
saying that
there's
I'm not saying your idea doesn't work, but I do think like if it is going to be superimposed over actual history, there has to be something more, something greater that makes it so like again, what story are we telling here? Are we telling a are they going to win story or a how are they going to win story here? And I always kind of thought that Civilization needed to be a how are they going to win story, not an are they going to win story. But in the greater sense, and I think I had briefly talked about this, there is this great anime that I love called No Game No Life, which is very much a how will they win story, and it's
yeah.
about it's like this brother and sister high school duo who are like essentially just the best gamers straight up in the world. Doesn't matter the game; they can beat you at any game. It can be chess, it can be Smash Brothers, it can literally be anything, and they'll beat you. And it's a how will they beat you game. And so, and you and I had kind of talked about this a little bit, like this almost turns into like, well, adapting Civilization. What about adapting like Sim City or
Yes.
Roller Coaster
Yes.
Tycoon or
Yes.
any of the simulator games?
Yes. Yes.
And I just don't know how you do it
So to
without that like kind of uh what's the word? Not ethereal, but like greater entity kind of
Okay.
construction. And my idea would have been, okay, maybe in the first episode of the first season, it's these two, I don't know, demi-deities kind of thing, and they're arguing about who could play God better or whatever, and it turns into a game of civilization with human race on Earth and stuff like that. But it's more of that alternate universe feel rather than current universe. And then maybe like the end of episode 1 is one of them realizes that maybe things aren't going their way, and they go down to Earth and try to influence it directly rather than
I think
just,
that is
you know.
putting too much on the story. Here's what I will say. Like, I
But it
think
has to have a story.
I think it will. I think so.
Okay.
No matter what the show is about, I
Hmm.
think it is important to narrow in on the idea of two nations at any given
Okay.
point in time, two nations struggling, and so it's an ensemble show at any given point where you
Okay.
have parties of both nations. So to me, the how will they win version is the version where we stick to history. That's the version where we stick to history and we dive into both of those worlds, and it starts seeming plausible that either party could win. You see what I'm saying? And it's like, how is this going to happen? Because we're focusing on the best efforts of all these different characters under all these different circumstances. And I think that's one way to approach the show, and I do like it. But hearing what you said,
Oh, so you're almost like, it's almost like an Oppenheimer for you.
oh yeah, except a little bit more arc, and
Right.
and 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 it's casting a wider net. Again, you know that I love Manhattan.
So like my favorite docudrama of all time is a movie. This is my favorite one because this is a movie that no one has ever heard of. I have yet to encounter anyone who actually knows this movie.
Okay, say it.
It's called 4 Minutes.
I
It's
think
an ES. It's do you know it
no,
before I tell
I
you what it's
don't,
about?
but I think you've told me about this before.
It's an ESPN docudrama about Sir Roger Bannister running the first sub 4 minute mile ever recorded in human history. And like, yes, probably people ran a sub 4 before him, but it was never recorded, and is anything like that. It's the first, sub 4 ever recorded in human history. And so, like, that at the end of the movie, he's going to do it, kind of thing. Like, clearly there's no movie if he doesn't do it.
Yes, we did discuss it.
But,
Yes.
but how does he get there?
Yep.
And it is a wonderful movie. No one knows about it. You can't even watch it on like Amazon Prime. You can only, I think, you have to buy the DVD. Is the only way you can watch it at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And I have the DVD of it because it's a wonderful movie, and it's really a wonderful movie. Christopher Plummer is in it, kind of thing, and and it is very much like kind of like that. So I do think there's definitely merit in that kind of storytelling. But my only question is like, why is it civilization then? What makes it civilization and adaptation of the game?
What
As
to
opposed
me,
to anything else.
what to me is so in that version of the film, and to the point of the other version of the film where we're sort of playing a little bit more fast and loose.
Yeah.
I think that as long as we maintain that two nation trying to resolve a certain resource in the development, they're all trying to become bigger, and they wind up using other people in their efforts to become bigger. That's always sort of where it goes. You see what I'm saying? Like, we're trying to achieve this next stage of our civilization, and we're gonna swallow you. We're gonna do this. We're gonna do that. You see what I'm saying? We're gonna do whatever it takes to get there. And there's other, and so they wind up competing. I think as long as we have that, and I think it can
But
be
what's the through line though?
well.
Because, and this is the key for me. This is the key thing to make it an adaptation of the game. Because in the game, there is only one anchor point that generates the through line, and it's the player.
Right.
There's nothing else.
Right.
Which is why I kind of like that idea of having it be like these two gods, demigods, whatever you want to be, trying to like settle a bet.
I get that, but I think that first of all, it dilutes the stakes.
Like, I don't think it has to.
And I
think that in the hands of an inexperienced writer, it absolutely would. But I don't think it has to, because I think there are some and trust me, I know that I am kind of towing the line into a more fantasy thing here.
Yes.
I get that. And I know that's not civilization, but I think that there is some kind of allure in, instead of the gods just being like, the quote unquote cosmic babysitters, right? There becomes a degree through them pursuing the goal of winning the bet or whatever it is, of them going down and to living into the mortal but immortal
Yeah.
life. But all of a sudden there is this kind of they come to realize that, they don't imbue themselves with magical powers or anything like that. It's about influence. It's about doing it in a mortal methodology, even though that they will, they are immortal and they will live through the eons, where all of a sudden they can't just be magic, right? They have to use their superior ability and intellect to cause influence and steer as best they can, to manipulate. And then what ends up happening is that it's not as easy as they thought it was. And so I think there's this really interesting thing where we don't need the story to actually be told through the lens of these creators. It can still be told through the two nations, the way you want it.
Yeah.
Right? But there are these immortal beings that exist throughout, that at certain points affect the story in profound ways, in ways that human history couldn't have ever operated, kind of thing. And maybe there is a fun way to tie in kind of these, like, some of the conspiracies or whatever, where it's like, like clearly the Aztecs couldn't have come up with aqueduct technology, or clearly the Egyptians couldn't have built the pyramids, or whatever you want to believe, kind of thing.
I hear you on all of that. I think that is a magnificent story. I don't think it's this story.
Okay, all right. I mean, I had my pitch, but
I think that there's a strong.
I think it's an interesting way to do it.
I think that well, I'll put it to you this way.
Sure.
I think that civilization, as thematically, is all about the power of human achievement. Fundamentally.
Okay, yeah. I'll agree with that.
And you got to leave it up to the mortals.
But you could. Even in the version I'm telling you, you could.
Oh,
you could have the mortals fighting back and being like, no. We're going to do it our way. That could actually be like a huge thematic turning point, where it's like this decision that we're not going to listen to, whatever this oracle is anymore. We're going to do it the way we best feel it. And it works.
But then you have a conflict that doesn't exist in the game.
What do you mean?
So.
Oh, yeah. A conflict that doesn't exist in the game. Right. Because, like, clearly your civilization is never going to not do what you tell it to do.
Now your civilization is trying to break away from you as a god, which I think is another great story. I think it's
but it's not this story. Yeah,
I think that there's
this is the anime brain in me. Like this, if this was let's be fair, if this was done as a Japanese anime, this is how it would probably go down, kind of thing.
It's very possible. Yeah. And there's also, like, for example, the story of Nemesis in Greek mythology. Like, Nemesis is the bounty hunter of the gods, and depending on where you
live, that's right.
Like, she's the leader of the Furies, and there's a case to be made that she made herself a god by hunting.
Oh, you know what I was thinking? You said Nemesis, and my brain went to the Nemesis Project from Resident Evil. That's what happened.
Of course.
That's what happened there.
It's a good name for the project because it is thematically in keeping with but at the end of the day, I think there's a lot of great stories about even the story of Gore in Thor is a great story about a person making himself a god through the systemic annihilation of other gods. Like, and you've got
him encountering what was it? It was called the Shadow Blade or something like that.
Yeah.
That is not. I mean, that
very
is
literary.
As you and I
it's very
about.
literary.
Yeah, that's a literary thing. That's a literary device, not a cinematic device.
Correct.
Yeah.
But it is a compelling story, and it is a compelling job to give a character.
Right.
And I wrote a tabletop role-playing game about a civilization trying to pry itself loose from its gods, and it doesn't work because I use so much cultural appropriation. But the concept itself is really good. And
another thing, how do you do this without doing cultural appropriation?
Well,
kind of thing.
There's a couple of solutions to that. I think first of all, you can anchor yourself in the timeline, like we said.
Sure.
Or alternatively, I think if you're going to embrace the idea that this is an anthology that utilizes alternate history, which is fine and that works, then I think we need to lean into the appealing parts of alternative history. I think you cannot make that show without an Afrofuturistic like
So
society.
I am going to be honest, which is that I understand that this was your pitch, but I don't see a way to superimpose it over actual history. I think it does have to be a retelling, an alternate telling of history kind of thing, or an
Okay.
alternate universe kind of situation, because I do think that the audience, if the audience knows what's coming, I just don't know what differentiates it from actual history and makes it an adaptation of civilization. I don't think there's anything that can be added to it that will allow for that, unless we take it that like kind of fantasy route kind of thing, where
Okay.
it's like there are greater things. But I do like the idea. And it's like what it's like the Americans, right? The show. Or maybe it's not the Americans, because the Americans was still meant to be like actual Cold War. What am I? Man in the High Tower? Is that what I'm thinking
Castle,
of?
Man in the High Castle.
Man in the High Castle, right? Where it's like different. Is Man in the High Castle if the Nazis won World War II? Is that
Yes.
what it is?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So I think it needs to be more Man in the High Castle feel. Um, and I think the way that you tie the through line is I think you start at the earliest ages of civilization, and you have these iconic leaders, and the iconic leaders become essentially the personification and the identity of the nations through the ages. So everything we see them do in that initial season is thematic to all subsequent things that happen in the future, kind of thing. I think that's kind of the way to do it, where because there is still a degree of that, right? Like, and without being
Oh,
disparaging, like
systems of
that's
power. Systems of power get inherited from
systems of
generations.
power. Look at Christianity,
Yeah.
which is like, again, in the beginning it was just an idea.
Yep.
It hasn't always been kind of thing. I mean, there are lots of historical records that the meeting in Constantinople in 400 AD and stuff like that, and
Yeah.
where these decisions were made, and they have irrevocably changed the course of history,
Yeah.
kind of thing. And we still to this very day take actions, make laws, pass laws, strike down laws based on those influences,
That's
kind
true.
of thing.
I
So
need
I think
to
that
excuse myself for a
yeah,
quick sec.
sure.
Let's take a 2 minute. I'll be right back.
Yeah, I got to refill my water bottle too.
Okay.
So let's
Perfect.
let's take a quick break. Dude, real quick, I gotta say, my cat is just hamming it up out there right now. He's lying on the kitchen tile, and I get out there and he's like this, and he's sleeping, and he cracks an eye open, and he sees me,
Yeah.
and he just starts going.
Hey, hey, you.
"Hmm?"
You could be petting me.
He's just making the biscuits so full of love. He's such a cute.
So I think So
Can I just
Yeah.
quickly finish? I thought of like this really great thing about that. What I just pitched you is that like, if you consider it through the lens of like, now these initial leaders were kind of like the cultural anchor for these two nations kind of thing. I think it gives a really big opportunity for really like deep, multi-dimensional, layered like character development.
Yeah.
In how future characters either lean into the culture or kind of resist or rebel against the culture,
Or just use it to the advantage of their own goals.
Yes.
Like you don't necessarily.
Yes.
So you don't necessarily want it to be a push-pull thing. You
Right.
want it to be more of a like. And so the other thing that
It's not push-pull is one-dimensional. This is very much three-dimensional.
And I think so. I think if you're developing this alternative history, I think, and if the goal of every civilization is to realize its own fullest potential using the resources that it has and the tools that it has, and to try and everybody's trying to become Wakanda.
Yeah, sure, sure.
Like,
I like that as a goal. Everyone's trying to become Wakanda.
Like, and they're willing to screw each other
over.
Like,
absent the Deus Ex Machina of vibranium.
Yes, that's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Right.
And so, in each season, so you pass by generations, you pass by epochs, like you said, right? You pass by all these, like in each
the Bronze Age, the Iron Age,
but
the Silicon Age.
But specifically, it would be about the development of bronze as a tool for warfare and of like their efforts to win a war in which superior weapons are necessary. So you've got people figuring out how bronze works, and then you've got people trying to mine and find mines and do all these things. You've got the government.
Something. Maybe this is a little bit of like what we would colloquially call as like high concept, right? But how many times in popular media have we seen stories about the quest for technology in ancient times?
Yes.
Right? Like, there are tons of stories about it, in modern times, in future times.
It must have been the same.
But,
it must have been the same. It must have been the same people, the same circumstances.
It's just on a way flatter curve kind of thing.
Yep.
And that's, so what made me think about that is, look, we can discuss the shortcomings of the action or not, whatever, but I was really, despite the big flaws inherent in the fourth Indiana Jones movie, I really loved the fifth one, Dial of Destiny.
I have not seen
it honestly, like, and again, knowing the kind of writer that you are, I suspect you will find some things about it that you were like, Hollywood. But there is very much an element of, and I mean, I don't really want to spoil it for you or for anyone who might be listening, but there is towards the end very much an element of how technology and the discovery of technology and the quest for technology was extremely important even in, the BCE years kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's really, the problem is like they lens it through a kind of like eye roll worthy trope in the fifth movie.
Yeah.
But that said, there's still like a kind of mystique and allure to it, which the movie gets away with because every Indiana Jones movie has a little bit of like that occult mystique and allure to it.
Absolutely.
Kind of thing. So they can get away with it.
Yes.
No, I don't think any other movie or franchise ever would be able to get away with what they did in Dial of Destiny. That doesn't mean that it's not a good movie. I do think it is a good movie.
They throw exoticism towards other cultures, is what it comes down to.
They throw what?
Exoticism towards other cultures.
No, it's they lean into time travel a little bit.
Okay.
Which is again like.
Of course they do.
Right. It's about Archimedes' dial. And the thing, my thought about time travel is I don't think that time travel is like a reprehensible thing at all. But if you're going to tell a story about time travel, the story has to be entirely about time travel. Time travel can't just be like this element that's part of a greater equation. The entire equation has to be thematically connected to tonally connected to time travel. And many stories don't do that. That's why I love Steins Gate as an anime, because Steins Gate is an anime about time travel. The entire anime is specifically about time travel and the problems it presents. It's like Back to the Future. I think Back to the Future works as a movie.
Yeah.
Because it's about time travel. It's not about a problem that gets solved with time travel. It is about time travel.
How do you feel about Endgame?
Yeah.
It conflicts with your. You're saying it does.
It does. I give Endgame a pass. The reason that I give Endgame a pass is because they ridicule it in the narrative. And I understand from the writer's perspective, it's lazy writing. I can't argue against that.
I don't necessarily agree. I think my only problem with Endgame, my one problem with Endgame, technically, I don't like the fat phobia. I don't like the fat phobia. Like,
that is.
But the other thing is,
I can make a compelling argument for how they portrayed it is okay though.
But it came from a place of, and the other thing I don't love.
The issue is that I think the issue is that it comes from a place of correlating body image and mental health to a negative kind of thing.
Yes.
And that's a problem. But they all do also do the thing, right? And I think this is very important. And this is why I'm not going to disagree with you, but I can't agree with you about the fat phobia thing, which is that when Thor remembers he's worthy and starts kicking real ass again, right? They didn't thin him down.
Yeah.
His ability to be a hero and be awesome and kick ass is not connected to his image or his weight.
No, and at the same time, like, if you're going
internally it is for him though.
And on top of that, if you're going to show an underrepresented character, do not show that underrepresented character in an arc that showcases their underrepresentation. Don't write about the fat guy with body images problems. Write about the fat guy becoming president.
Oh, this is like what you told me in with like Age of Ultron with Scarlett Johansson being like, I can't have kids.
Yes,
kind
exactly.
Of thing. It's that same kind of thing. Yeah.
What's that, sweetie? It was, Evan says it was a really poor take on mental illness. The other thing that bothers me about the script is that it all starts with Ant-Man falling back into the universe.
Well, yeah, I mean that is of course an issue because it's just totally random. Now, I understand, I get it, because the whole idea and concept and tone of the quantum realm is randomness.
Yes.
So I get that to a degree, except for the fact that
it's rationalized. It's not.
It's a rat walking around the storage unit that presses the button, and that's a problem.
If he had found his own way out, I wouldn't have
had. And that's what it needed to be, right? But the problem is that that's another movie by itself. So
or you come in at the last moment of that movie.
Which movie?
The movie where Ant-Man gets out of the quantum realm.
No, I'm saying, but that's a movie by itself.
No, but what I'm saying is you just allude to the existence of that movie.
You're talking about like a start like super in medias res kind of thing.
Yes.
And yeah, okay, yeah, no, I think that would be fine too. Actually,
you don't need to
that would have solved that problem. I do want to actually, if you don't mind, I would like to talk about Thor in Chris Hemsworth in the fat suit for a second.
Okay.
Because I think there's a very important thing, and the reason I'd like to talk about it, I think this is a very important observation to make, which is that you're not wrong at all, right? In the slightest. You're absolutely correct that when we're talking about something like this and making it about just those kind of like easy to access thoughts for people who don't have experience with trauma and mental health and stuff like that, it's not ideal. But I'm going to take a diplomatic approach to this, which is that, and this is in no way in shape or form a criticism of you or Evan or anyone, But people like me, and I am guilty of this as well, who have experienced pain and trauma and understand the kind of internal suffering that goes on. We get it. Pain is impatient, and so we want the world to see the truth of the matter for what it is as quickly as possible. But that is not practical. I do not believe for a second that that is practical. Humanity as a species is very resistant to change as a result of survival instinct. We are used to we are comforted by things we are used to. Mm-hmm. And anytime we start trying to make big changes in culture and society, and especially the way that society as a whole thinks, it doesn't work.
I hear you.
Right? Like it's the long. This is kind of the conversation we had a couple days ago. The side of good can only win the long game.
Yes.
It can't win the short game.
Yes,
and so, well, give me 1 second. I have one concluding thought to this, which is that, like, so when it comes to Thor, Fat Thor, right? Do I think that they really did it perfectly the right way? No, I don't. But I do think that the effort that they put in to show the simple idea, and the simple idea is that body image, body weight, and the internal traumas that we have do not need to correlate to internal excellence and self-worth.
Yeah.
That's the message in Endgame, because and I'm going to say that that's the message of Thor's arc in Endgame, because the truth of for people who have not been exposed to traumas, or if we even want to take a step, people who are neurotypical, right? That's all they can digest at one time.
And that's fine.
Kind of thing.
That's
fine.
I don't have an issue with this, but my point is on a craft basis. Because, like,
you're right. On a craft basis, it's inefficient. And it's not ideal.
If they had simply leaned into Thor's effort to accomplish his goal, and if medicating...
But what's his goal?
He doesn't have one. He's a showcase for theme. And this is where we create offensive material by using underprivileged characters as showcases for theme. We do it all the time. And ultimately, like, if he had a mission, and if he had been medicating himself with food in order to accomplish that mission, and if he had also been using every other tool at his disposal to accomplish that mission...
Well, he's medicating himself with beer.
Yes.
It's not food, it's right. Beer. He's big from the alcohol, from the substance use.
But my point is, you know, if he had been playing sober instead of playing drunk, basically, if he had been trying to accomplish his goal and using the tools at his disposal to do that, even if they're not great, then...
So you would have liked to see him, like, eating salads, but washing them down with beer.
No, what I'm saying is I would have liked to have seen him... Maybe his goal is to bury the past. And if that's the case, I can understand why he's drinking so much. But he's got to be doing other things to achieve that goal as well. And one of the things that he has to do, that explains why he lets go of Asgard. It explains why he becomes his own person. He has to go find out who Thor is, and that's great. But that's
not what trauma does to people, though. And you know that. Like,
well,
trauma is debilitating. Trauma makes you want to not do things.
Yes, and so the trauma is another thing that he has to carry with him in his efforts to accomplish his goal. And ultimately his efforts can be really, really weakened, but they have to be there.
This is a really difficult topic for me. And I don't know if it's difficult for you or for anyone else, but because I don't disagree with anything you're saying. I agree with you about what you're saying from a craft standpoint. Like, yes, you're right. That it's not ideal writing. You know, it misses out on opportunity that could have otherwise existed,
and that would have prevented all the problems that we're discussing here as well.
But, and this is what I say, I can't look at a film or any project only as a writer.
Right.
I can't do it. I have to look at these things as not just as a filmmaker, but also as a producer.
Right.
Which is that, look, I have heard some crazy things from other people in the industry, whom you and I have discussed in the past, which are kind of I don't buy into the things I've heard about how Hollywood is being used as a machine of propaganda. Now, look, there's of course there is utility to a degree, right? Of like, and we all know, like from declassified documents, right? Like that the first liaison between Hollywood and the CIA in the post-war era was none other than Walt Disney, kind of thing. That's true. That's historically been proven that to be true. But that said, I don't think that there is this crazy agenda from Hollywood to like Pizzagate and stuff. No, that's
people
ridiculous.
produce movies for their
Yes,
own reasons whenever they
exactly.
like that's
Exactly. My point is this. I have watched enough mainstream tentpole Hollywood in my life to feel that no, the goals of the industry are to help illuminate better things.
I agree.
It's very clear to me. And look, do people go about it in the right way? Is everyone trying to do that? No, of course not. Of course there are people out there who only care about making their money and they don't care who suffered, whatever. But I firmly believe that those people are in the minority, and the vast majority of Hollywood, specifically the big Hollywood productions, are really trying to make the world a healthier, better place.
Let me be clear. I have a really good impression of Anthony and Joe Russo. Like I
Yeah.
have a really good impression of these guys.
Yes.
And we're just talking about
But this is my point, right? Because you're right about like they are expressing theme through the lens of a character which otherwise doesn't really serve purpose.
And to me this is frustrating because it's something I've had to work through. Like I come from a family that's drowning in addiction.
Yes.
And
you're talking to someone who used to be fat. Right? Before I was an international level athlete, I was a 5'8", 225-pound kid that could not run a mile in any stretch of time, regardless of speed. I would have to walk. I couldn't run it. And then, 10 years of hard effort later, I turned myself into an international level athlete kind of thing.
Yep.
So I get it. I'm not sitting here from a point of privilege about this.
Yeah.
But there are many people who don't get it. The same way that and that is not, that's not a rag on any people who don't get it. There's nothing wrong with not being able to relate to something as long as we don't judge the thing. And and this is what I'm getting at. The problem is that because of society, civilization, however we got to where we were, civilization, right? Yeah. It all connects, this full circle moment. That
you must be a writer.
We are prejudiced against things we don't understand.
Yes.
And I think it is an effort. And maybe it, even if it is weaker writing or whatever we want to call it, I think it is an effort to make a point that it's okay.
I agree.
For people who don't understand. And I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to say that that is more valuable than the excellence of the craft of writing.
I bring up these points not because I don't applaud the effort. I bring up these points because I do not want people replicating the results under the impression.
Yes. And you know what? That is a very astute observation to make, right? Just because I am kind of defending it in Endgame. I'm not going to lie. I am defending it in Endgame. That doesn't mean I'm just going to unilaterally defend it across the board, because you're absolutely correct, especially with like Black Widow and Age of Ultron. That one I'm not defending.
And this is a similar thing. If someone else made the same mistake that the Russo brothers made and not taking a step forward, that's a problem.
Yeah.
And they're not going to take a step forward because Endgame did it. It's perfect. And it's like, hold on, guys. Let's talk about representation. Let's talk about because, and this is going back to your point. Like, is it possible to tell a story of addiction of any kind that is active? My mom was.
That's hard.
It is so hard because addicts are like Swiss Army knives of rationalization. Like,
and the truth is that like with addicts, the goal is to get the thing they're addicted to by any means necessary.
But it's not, though. This is yes and no, yes and no. Like
yes and no.
So my relationship with my mom was defined by addiction every day of my life. Right. And I just had a long conversation with a guy who's writing a similar story about addiction, and he Like he painted this, there's the monster and the person, and that's a really useful literary tool, and it's a really useful tool in therapy as well. However,
Yeah.
it's not good for the actor because the actor just winds up selling the addiction. They're trying to show
Right.
that
And this is the key, and if I may, this is your key point,
it
right?
really is.
Which is that addiction is not actually part of anyone's authentic self.
I would
It is something else.
for the actor.
Yeah.
I
Well,
think,
for the actor, it's something else. It's not. It doesn't answer the question of who am I.
Let's
kind
go
of thing.
ahead. Let's go. Part of writing a really great character is assuming that their entire journey is their own fault. Not writing is not therapy. We've had that discussion. So let's go ahead.
Well, writing movies is not that. To be clear, writing books can be.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for making that distinction.
Got to say that. Yeah.
So, in the case of an actor, I'm going to go ahead and do the opposite and say it is a part of who they are. And here's what I mean by that.
Okay.
A character, a person. And we've also had plenty of discussions about how active and passive storytelling coexists in any actual narrative. In any real life thing, there's a part that's active, there's a part that's passive.
Because you cannot eliminate luck from real life. You cannot. Or let's call it chance. You cannot eliminate chance from real life.
But also free will. You can't eliminate free will from life.
Correct. Also true. Very much.
So, my mom my mom was medicating herself because the pain was stopping her from doing what?
What she wanted.
What she wanted, which was not necessarily the addiction itself and all the rationalizations that came out of it were an effort to suppress pain in order to get somewhere, in order to go somewhere. And in my experience with my mother, her mission really was to become someone that she respected and loved. That was her mission. And
I think we actually agree on this point. It's just that I think maybe our terminology is or our definitions are very slightly different. To me, I agree with everything you just said, but to me, that's not that still doesn't change that addiction is not part of the answer to who am I for an actor.
Fair enough. But it is a tool that the actor is using to accomplish their goal, and it's a horrifically ineffective tool that will sabotage their efforts. But it's also
addiction specifically.
Yes. Or the object of the addiction, at least. But it's also
that's a better way of saying it for sure.
But it's also the best tool they have in that moment to try and accomplish that goal, because otherwise they would have reached for something else. So they are trying to get somewhere, and they're trying to use this tool, and the tool is making them more and more dependent. And
I'm going to rephrase what you said. I'm going to say it's not the best tool that they have. It's the least painful tool that they have.
Well, maybe
that's what I'm going to say.
Maybe their pain tolerance is factoring into what they're capable of. Like other.
Well, absolutely, yes. I would say absolutely it is.
So,
but this is the whole thing, right? Like someone who's an alcoholic, right? And I'm not going to even. I have never been an alcoholic. I'm going to speak about it from food because I have been addicted to food in the past. I told you this. I suffered from binge eating disorder in my past.
Yeah.
And when I was addicted to food, it's suffocating mentally, right? Yeah. Because I've always wanted to be a writer. Even back then, I was a writer. I was making my way through the stunt industry back then, and I was really hard trying to pursue stunts. How difficult do you think it is to pursue a career that requires you to be in top-notch athletic shape and you can't stop eating food?
Yes.
Kind of thing. And especially in like what healthy food can we find in this day and age? And back then, I was very much, struggling with money, so I couldn't go out and buy healthy food, which is the most ridiculous thing about the world we live in right now. I had to go and buy the pre-processed junk that's self-sustainable.
Yep.
And so it became this huge struggle. It's like, and I knew I shouldn't be doing it. I was present to it. I was like, I shouldn't be doing this. I should be doing better things and other things. And I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop because all I could think the only thing my brain could think about was food. You wake up, you think about food. As you're falling asleep, you're thinking about, how am I going to handle the food tomorrow? Mm-hmm. And you can't think about anything else.
You get lost in the loop of the addiction, but even that loop is being sustained because you're trying to use that loop to get somewhere. Because I can tell you with total confidence, my mom, if she had believed at some point, at the end of her life, the only real tool that she had to try and become that person that she could respect and love was gaslighting, and it wasn't living up to her expectations, but she was still trying. Because if she had given up on that goal, she would have killed herself.
Right, and this is you give up on that and you lose all sense of identity.
Yep.
kind of thing. And that's what it is. It becomes part of your identity. So I guess maybe in that sense, it is part of who am I.
And and that's taking ownership over it in a way that gives the
Yeah.
actor power to use the tool. Like that gives the actor power to, in any scene, try to get what they're trying to get, which is never just the next fix. Even if they've forgotten why they're trying to get the next fix, there is an underlying pressure to get that next fix so you can stay alive long enough to do X. Like there's that X that you're trying to get.
It does kind of overwrite what's underneath it, doesn't it?
But that underneath it is still driving it, and that's the problem. It utilizes your goals against you, but also you're using it to get to where you want to go, and you have to use that. Now, this is all acting theory that we're talking about here, but there is, like, again, there's two sides to every story. It's not.
But that's important though, even for writers. That's important. You have to understand acting theory.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And this basic, what you have to understand acting theory.
You have to understand acting theory.
Putting
if you want to be a good writer, at least for film.
This is where Endgame fell short for me, because if the Russo brothers had taken that acting theory approach with Chris, which he certainly deserves and certainly has the relationship to, like,
and is capable of doing,
the character could have been fat and so much less, and all the same themes, but in the subtext as opposed to in the text. And ultimately, I know that Chris Hemsworth bends. Like, one of the moments that broke my heart about the first Avengers is when he turns to Tony Stark and says he's adopted. And Chris Hemsworth actually said in an interview that he objected to that line with Joss Whedon.
What was the line again? The context of the line?
Like he's saying we can't just, like, let's remember.
He was talking Loki's my brother, and Scarlet, and then there's like
Black Widow's like he just murdered all these people, and he's like he's adopted, and Thor's like and Chris Hemsworth went to Joss Whedon and said, like, this is just not ground that Thor can acknowledge that his brother has done great harm, but he would not, like, just disown him for, like, and Joss Whedon's like, trust me, it'll get a laugh, and it did. Because it betrayed the character. Because it was observational and not in character. And Chris was right on that one. Like, it was a cheap laugh.
It is a cheap laugh. It is. It's the difference between getting the cheap laugh. Okay, so you know what? There's a really, if I may, real quick, there's a really beautiful example of this in a movie that just came out, The Instigators.
Okay.
At the end of the movie, the very end, and I'm gonna do my best to say this without giving any spoilers.
I will watch the film.
I highly recommend it. It's really good. I was a stunt double for the character playing Matt Damon's son in that movie. And we only see Matt Damon's son in the very last scene of the movie. And the whole point is that Matt Damon's son is playing hockey, ice hockey. And in the script, he's like, we're basically just supposed to see him, and he's like waving to someone in the crowd. And as he's waving to someone in the crowd, he gets like blindside checked, kind of thing, just obliterated. And that was what I was supposed to be. I was supposed to be the person doubling, and I'm the person getting obliterated, kind of thing.
Yep.
And then on the day, I was told that they weren't gonna do it. They had me anyway, just in case, but like they weren't gonna. I said whatever. I still get my day. That's fine, and my name is still in the credits. And so now the end of the movie is just him like waving in the crowd, and that's the end, right? And I thought about it when I saw the movie, and I was like, that was the correct decision. Even though as like an actor, I was like, I wish I'd been able to get out there and get blasting, get my stunt adjustment, and no. For the narrative, and not just for the narrative, but thematically, it was correct, because you either have this opportunity. It's a heist comedy, right? The whole movie is a heist comedy. And underneath the heist comedy, there is very much this huge and really obvious social commentary on how, like, your typical, stereotypical Boston man doesn't need to be as scared of his emotions as we are all led to believe, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And if you end the movie with this just blasting of Matt Damon's son, yes, people will laugh. It's funny. Don't get me wrong, but it's a cheap laugh.
Yeah.
Do you really want, if you have the choice between cheap laugh
is that your call? Really? Yeah, exactly.
But the alternative is ending on a poignant moment, a cathartic moment.
Yeah.
And I'm very much in in the camp of the most important moment of any movie is the end, no matter what, because it's what sticks with the audience.
Okay.
When they walk into it's the thing that sticks with the audience. If you leave the audience with a cathartic moment, then yes, you had a heist comedy, and it was funny, and they were laughing, but they'll realize because they're not walking out of the theater laughing, because they're walking out of the theater feeling the catharsis, they're going to remember the message more.
I agree with that.
And the message is so important. And
so, quick aside.
And just really quick to finish. To me, when I realized that, I was like, not only do I agree with the choice, I applaud them for making it.
Yeah.
Because it would have been so easy to just get the cheap laugh.
Yep.
But then the message gets buried.
I bet you that came from the editor. I bet everybody was pushing for the laugh, and the editor was like, "Just give me a sec."
Well, I mean, the decision to not shoot me getting blasted was made on the day on set.
Okay,
So would that have been an edit? No, I think that was a Matt Damon call, to be honest. And I applaud him for it because I think because the message is important, and it's not. I think that if you do watch it, I don't think that it is like all framed through addiction. Like, we were talking about with Chris Hemsworth. I don't think that it's not. These characters are still themselves, and it's not really about addiction. It's dealing more about with like PTSD and stuff like that. But still, the message is really like it's a lovely message. It's told wonderfully. It's told culturally. None of it's on the nose really, and by ending on that cathartic moment, it's like, again, it's telling the audience like, we don't need the cheap laugh here because it's okay to have these moments.
So for any particular reason and in any particular order, top 5 Boston movies.
Me?
Yep.
Good Will Hunting.
Okay.
Good Will Hunting. The Instigators. No. Now look, you and I have had this discussion. I am not the biggest fan of The Departed. I'm not going to sit here and say that it is a bad movie or that it is an incomplete. No, it's clearly a very good movie. I'm not a big fan of it.
Can we agree that Mystic River is up its own ass, though?
I have not seen Mystic River.
Okay.
Although I have heard. Oh, but you know what I do have to say though. I mean, like I would be remiss to not include like Manchester by the Sea kind of thing.
I see.
And so, but think about this. Like we're naming Matt Damon and Affleck movies, all of them. They're all Matt Damon and Affleck movies. I am not going to speak on the Wahlbergs, but like Ted is never going to make that list for me.
You know what is easily in my top 5, which is not what you're saying?
What?
The Fighter.
Oh yeah,
Oh man,
okay.
That's a good movie.
Well, I'm not going to judge that. I'm not going to judge that at all. Like, that's totally a fine.
Now,
thing.
I also lived like I was in the Leominster Lynn area for quite some time. Like the Limerick, right?
Oh my God, you're gonna love this line in The Instigators so much. Casey Affleck is like, oh my God, so it's a car chase. They're in the middle of a car chase, and Casey Affleck is like, just really cannot shut his mouth, just grilling the therapist kind of thing. And he's like, "Are you even from Boston?" And she's like, "I was raised in Lynn." And he's like, "Oh, that explains it." Oh my God, it's so good. They're literally going. They're running from the cops, crossing the Memorial Drive Bridge over the Charles River, and you have this massive, like, just huge. It's like there's the state police from everywhere, like hundreds of cops, because they think they're cop killers, but they're not. And it's just like he's just grilling the therapist because he's interested in her. He has to know these things. Kind of, you're not even from Boston. I grew up in Lynn. Oh, that explains it.
So for anybody who's watching who's not aware, Lynn is famous, and there is a limerick that goes, "Lynn, Lynn, the city of sin, you'll never get out the way you went in." And that's
Yeah.
Which is true.
There was a man. There once was a man from Nantucket, right? Like, you know,
But Lynn is
yeah. Lynn
notorious
and
for
Lowell.
crime. Lynn and Lowell are notorious for
Yep.
crime, and
The
and
mill towns, in case anyone doesn't
yep,
know,
abandoned.
those were like the most famous when you hear about like the women in the mills, the linen mills, back during the the onset of the Industrial Revolution and kind of stuff like that. That was Lynn and Lowell
Yep,
right there.
yep,
I had school field trips up to those mills when I was in elementary school and middle school, stuff like that.
yep, yep. Yeah,
But
like so good.
we were talking originally about the time travel in Endgame,
Right.
kind of thing.
So
Yeah.
going back to Civilization, I
Right.
think that the idea here would be to switch societies, switch couples kind of every single season, and to switch
Oh,
at
get a lens of like different nations. So we're
different
not
nations.
sticking on the same nation
No,
throughout.
but what you are dealing with
I
is,
think that could work.
but I think it's the same. I think you're dealing with the same. You're following the institutions of power and the systems of power and the iconography as it gets built, and you're dealing with.
So, yes. Yes. And the whatever the finale season is, whatever your last season is, has to be the game. It's all of them in the big battle for dominance kind of thing. Whatever that is, whether it's technological race, whether it's militaristic dominance, whatever it is, we got to bring everyone back at the end. Then
I think it ends. I think the season, the whole series,
yeah,
ends on a cliffhanger. I think it ends on the eve of nuclear annihilation. I think it ends on. I think you have.
You're never gonna get me to buy into that.
Really? I don't think.
Never gonna get me to buy into that because audiences hate it. Audiences despise it more than anything else. And I'm sorry. And I understand at the end of the day, we do care about making good writing and stuff like that. But I very much am on board with the Jean-Paul Sartre sentiment, which is that he wrote this big long thing on to whom does art belong, kind of. The moment it is put in the public's eye, it becomes property of the audience.
I agree.
And you can't write an ending that an audience is going to hate. I don't care. That's like that. That's a hard. If an audience is going to hate the ending, you can't write it. And look, I will say it with the caveat again that I've expressed to you about Loki season 2, which is like if I was a studio exec and you came into my office and pitched me the idea for have you seen it at this point, by the way?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. If you pitched me the idea for okay, we're gonna end season 2 of Loki with Loki just being god of everything. He is actually the master god. I'd have been like, get out of my office, kind of thing. Like, this is audiences are gonna feel so cheated. This is such a cop out, and then they did it masterfully because of the efforts of Loki and stuff like that.
And it also, to be clear, Loki is not actually in charge of anything. He is offering himself as essentially a channel.
But he does hold the power to destroy everything.
He does.
And it is by his hand that everything persists.
Yes.
So, look, I mean, that level of power is God. That's God power, kind of thing.
Yes.
And, for me, it's like, so, look, I'm not ending it on a cliffhanger, okay. But, oh man, you gotta really tell me how that's not gonna piss audiences off. Because have you seen the entirety of Lost?
Yeah.
I can't remember. All right, so again, imagine if Lost had just ended at the end of season 5, no season 6, and it just ends on the nuclear bomb going off, and that's all we get. Do you know how many people would just be talking and that series would have just been forever like what was the Roman punishment, just expunged from the record books kind of thing.
I might have preferred it myself.
No way.
Because in season 6 they took the action away from the entire cast and gave it to 2 other characters, but
you had to answer the questions that the audience had. You had to. It's not you can't disrespect an audience
I'm
just
not.
for the sake of good writing.
I don't think
If
that
the
it's.
audience is clamoring for answers to question, you have to answer the question. Unless you have a really, really good, profound, and visible, observable reason why not.
Well, to me, the answer is that like it's in your hands. Like you have to decide. Like as a society.
What do
Like
you mean?
like the point. Like I said, there's a level of satire to civilization, certainly, and because the
You're
character.
talking about our adaptation of it, kind of thing.
Well, the game.
Yeah, the game,
Like
sure.
I think that there's a level of like observe how this works. Like I think civilization is a cautionary tale, and I
Well,
think.
sure. Like if you use nuclear weapons in civilization, the entire world turns against you, kind of thing, and it wrecks the terrain, and
But more
it
than
shows you
that,
consequence.
I think it's not just the consequences. I think the point is that like there's traps in the process of there's traps in how we understand progress as a concept.
Okay. When
And
when you say we, do you mean we as a culture?
we as a conglomeration of cultures
Okay.
get seduced by systems of power which persist because of how we seek to leverage power and the addictive nature of power. Power is an addictive substance.
I think it's I think it's on a deeper level. I think it all comes down to survival instinct.
I
Power offers security.
I think that our definition of survival, I think that our understanding of how survival works is a product of systemic oppression that we no longer remember.
Oh, well, no, our understanding of survival is totally like lagging and behind the times, because again, like it's almost like genetically we're still coded to think like if we can't get food, if we can't get shelter, we're going to die. And the truth of the matter is that these things are readily accessible to everyone given work.
I also think the idea that food and shelter requires violence to procure, and,
I
and that
agree
and
that,
that it
that that's
and that
it doesn't.
it ever did
It never
is
did.
it never
It
did,
never did.
and yet the idea that like
It comes to ease though, right? Because like and this we as people I feel like are obsessed with making things easy.
but when did that become the easiest solution? And my
Violence?
yeah, and this is my
Violence is like is so easily understood and no, you don't need to speak anyone's language to understand violence though.
I agree with that, but I do think that there is a profound degree to which all of the assumptions we make, like this whole you gotta break a few eggs to make an omelet idea that exists in society, isn't just something that we've grown out of. I think that it's something we grew into.
Yeah.
And I
Well, it's a
think
narrative. It's a narrative that many people are indoctrinated with.
that's correct. And it's baked and my point is that in this way systems of power are self-perpetuating. And the leverage
Yes.
and the leveraging of those systems of power as they grow to accommodate new goals and new ambitions pulls even more sway and even more resources into those generators, and they pollute like anything that they
It's the
touch.
feedback loop. It's the
it's the,
feedback
it's
loop.
the feedback loop. So
Yeah.
ultimately the cautionary tale of civilization is like when you get into the Bronze Age, you have tied yourself down to the need to escalate yourself in the arms race. Like,
I see why you want to end it on a cliffhanger now. And I think there's a better way to do it. But when I say better, I don't mean in terms of strength of writing craft.
yeah,
I don't mean that. But I firmly, I'm not going to say exclusively, but I think that a large part of the problem that all society faces, and maybe less so in like some of the more some of the
yeah,
more
but get out of the
developed
trash.
like
Get out of there.
some of the more developed like European countries, I think this may not apply to. but
Yep.
we. Oh my god, I'm sorry. What had you said there? My brain. Oh, right, all right. I believe that it is far more important, puppy, to reward good behavior
Hmm.
rather than punish bad. Now, I'm not saying of course we do need to punish bad behavior, because you can't just like let people go on killing sprees and just be like, no, 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 this is, and just ignore them, kind of thing. That's not the answer. But you can't, if you don't have a reward system in place for being better
Hmm.
than average, you give people no incentive to be better than
Yeah.
average. And so this is why I think leaving it on that kind of cliffhanger is not as
Nice.
valuable,
I see.
because all you're doing is creating a caution. What you're doing is giving people a map of of what not to do. And it's really like, when we think about it in the grand
Yeah.
cosmological scheme of things, you're telling people like, don't do this one thing.
Yeah.
But you're not really helping them with all the other things that they shouldn't be doing.
I
Kind of
see.
thing. It's one out of the infinite.
Yeah.
Whereas if you show them a good ending that is supported by better action and better behavior, you're giving them the roadmap to success.
That makes sense. That
Which
makes
is
sense.
not, and to be clear, it's not like there's only one way
Right.
to get to heal or get better or to be successful or any of that. But there are, this is a thing we say in stunts, right? There's no one right way to do anything, but there are absolutely wrong ways to do something.
Yep. Yep.
And all you really need to, and this is the thing, everyone, and especially like in today's culture, everyone is so obsessed with the wrong, right? And is like, oh no, you did this wrong. Because again, if you can point out flaws in something, it's a way to assert self-superiority or self-validate or whatever it is. And we're so obsessed with that. And that's not it. That's not the way. We need to start looking internally, and instead of trying to demean others so that we don't have to change, so that
Yep.
we can be superior while maintaining status quo,
Yeah.
we need to show people that self-improvement and betterment
Pays off.
and being healthier and doing better, not only that it pays off, but that it's not something that needs to be feared.
Yeah.
It's so scary for a lot of people, because it does, you look at that hill you have to climb
Luna, calm down.
to self-improvement or betterment or whatever it is that you know internally you wish about yourself was different, and that mountain always looks outrageously high and outrageously steep, and it's really scary.
Now, to that point, and this is something
Yeah,
that occurred to me earlier on, so this isn't just a response, but it's an opportunity to bring in this
please,
idea.
yes.
Um, I think in any given period and in any given society that we sort of explore over the course of this development, I think it's a really important thing in every single society to have at least one person in different ways working on each of the end games. You
Are
have
you talking about the actual like game victories kind of thing?
it,
So
it,
space race,
more broadly, but yes,
like space race,
you
military
you have
conquest,
you have
diplomatic conquest.
for different reasons and in different ways and with different motivations and for different methods, you have one character looking to establish diplomatic ties with the world around them. You have one character looking to achieve military supremacy. And you have one character looking to satisfy um, their ignorance about the universe.
Can we scale it up? Can we make it? Yeah, it can start again with my idea, like where we start as the individual leaders of these societies or nations, kind of thing. Can we scale that up to have it be actual like entire nations looking to
I think
be mili-
you want every nation governed by all three impulses.
Well, see, but okay. I mean, look, I'm
Because
not going to say that can't work. It's an idea. I would kind of gravitate more towards the idea of actual entire societies having systemic cultural biases, where it's like,
yes, I agree.
where it was like the Mongols in history were
Yep,
conquerors, they
they
were
were.
warlords, and same with the
But the
Romans,
Mongols were
and let's
also
be,
amazing
and
scientists. And
yes, they
ultimately,
were, and
like
that's what enabled them to be conquerors,
so
kind of thing.
here's my point is that like different people are going to be achieving different levels in each of these societies, different levels of authority and different levels of of um of success. So I think that you want, like, in the what's the word, ensemble of it all, you
Yes.
want one character. So you have two nations in any particular project. You want one character in each of those nations working towards each of those end games, and they're going to have to work in different ways, not just depending on what their own ethics are, which will be different from character to character,
Of course. Of course.
but
Yes.
also with regards to the systems around them. So
Yes.
like, so you're going to have, and even in early societies, it's going to have a lot to do with religion. You're going to have like certain people committing heresy. Like Galileo might be one of those characters. Like,
Yeah.
and at the
It's
same
like I also see, like, I think there's also just, kind of adding on, snowballing onto what you're saying. It's like, when I think about like Braveheart as a story, like William Wallace, right? Like I think that's another great example of this kind of thing.
yep, it is.
So
And
yeah,
so and like and in a certain society, it's not necessarily, in Rome at a certain time, it's not the Roman government that's looking to achieve conquest. It's actually the church. Like, you have all of these different you have all of these different political bodies and all of these different methods of achieving X and Y and Z. But my point is that if you
it does start becoming very complex at a point,
it
kind of
really
thing.
does, and ultimately, like, some characters are going to find huge amounts of oppression in their efforts to accomplish that goal. Like, and
Of
that goal
course.
could be diplomacy. It might not be like, but what it does allow you to do is humanize and stop generalizing. It stops you from creating a generalization about the value of certain cultures. And
I agree. It
and
makes it makes it more individualized, which makes it more relatable, to be honest.
yes, and it allows you to see the efforts of people in any
Yeah.
society to achieve any kind of success. Do we have people in this country right now who are trying to conquer the world?
Oh,
100%
of course.
yes.
Of course.
Do we have people that are trying to advance our understanding of the world around us? 100%
Of
yes.
course.
Like, one of my personal
It doesn't matter.
strengths.
You could say anything, and it would be absolutely 100% someone is trying to do this.
What happened?
Yeah.
What happened when Trump became president? Like, one of the coolest things that I saw,
Right.
in that process was Rogue NASA. Like, what the fuck, you beautiful bastards! Oh my
Rogue
fucking
NASA.
god!
That was
Like,
funny. Yeah. Yeah.
holy shit! Like this person's identity had to be kept a secret. Like,
Yeah.
it was
This, of course, like brings up the whole like the whole, and I don't really want to turn this into a political thing,
yeah.
but like this brings up like the whole like how do we really feel about like WikiLeaks and stuff like that, which is like
I feel differently about WikiLeaks than I do about Rogue NASA. I'll tell you that. Like,
yeah I'm gonna be honest when it comes to stuff like this. I kind of tune it out because the truth of the matter is at the end of the day there is as far as I am concerned, absolutely nothing that I can do to affect change pertaining to whatever the thing is that I would be contemplating about, nor do I need to behave or feel in such a way to let it affect me.
mhm.
And this is another thing that I think a lot of people don't either grasp or really want to grasp, whether they're in denial or they just can't understand it because of where they are in their their holistic development kind of thing.
Mhm.
But an individual is capable of like essentially anything.
Mhm. I
um
agree.
what it boils down to is being able to compartmentalize the ego, and the psychological ego, the identity, the id kind of thing
Yep.
from anything else. Because what happens a lot of times is you get people with these really kind of like noble goals and these things that really are justifiable morally
Yes.
and ethically, but the problem is that because of something that's happened in their life or they feel some way about something, they turn it into this kind of like egotistical passion, and you see this so much with like woke behavior.
They start
And
rationalizing and they stop just doing the work. And this was
they,
this
but they rationalize it through their own subjective medium rather
absolutely.
than an objective medium. And there's, you know what, this blew my mind when I started having these kinds of realizations. There are a lot of people out there who think that objectivity doesn't exist.
Right. Yeah.
And like, no, it's like no,
It's a practice.
all that reality is just a collection of subjectivity, and it's like there's an
Oh,
element, there is an element of truth to that, right? But that's only if, again, that's only if you believe in just like isolated ego kind
Yeah.
of thing.
Yep. Yep.
And no one is going to convince me that that's the truth.
There's more to the
No one's
universe
going to
than
convince me.
there's more
There's
to the
more
universe
to the
than you.
universe than that.
And
Yes, there's more to the. Well, I'm gonna phrase it in perhaps a less direct way. There's more to the universe than any individual.
I agree 100%. And to that point, the reason why I felt so passionate of Gamma, I got the hat, I got the pin. Like, here's the thing. Like, NASA's culture
Yeah.
has always been about two central precepts, and this is something that they screen for very. They're care. It's a community of people dedicated to the advancement of human understanding, 100% committed. And the other side of that is that they understand NASA as a collective, understands that there are lives in their hands at all times. Heroes are depending on you, is part of the culture. And ultimately, there's a not on my watch aspect to this work where anybody who works specifically at the National Aeronautics and Space Administration has this ingrained support system pushing them to the conclusion that it cannot be allowed to be their fault if things go sideways. They have to be part of the solution and not part of the problem. That's why we always do one more test. That's why this, that's why that. And I knew in my heart, like, that Trump posed a threat to that. The not on my watch is like that. Your lives are in danger. You have families. You have to start thinking about. And then, pop, Rogue NASA pops up, and I'm like, oh, like some fucking intern, like was like, I got this. Like, I'm gonna make sure that they don't kill the public's access to actual raw scientific data. Not on my watch. Like, and I was like, oh, holy shit. Like, I even sent them like messages.
There's
Like, to the extent, had they would have been thrown in jail so fast if Trump had figured out who that person was and no one fucking told. Like, even as the EPA was systemically dismantled.
I disagree with that statement.
Oh, made me feel so good to see it.
I disagree with that statement because it's a really hard sell for the American people to just so blatantly violate the First Amendment. That's really tough.
Oh, that statement. I you know what though?
That's really tough.
It's a matter of national security. This person is violent. Like, that's because Trump had issued an executive order.
Look, I don't know if you know this about me. I was a political science major initially in college.
Mm-hmm.
I am very good with politics. I understand political gamesmanship and how politics, the structure of state and nation and market. I understand all of this extremely well. And it is never that simple.
You know,
I am not sitting here defending anyone. I am not here exonerating anyone. I am not going to give a political opinion on this podcast.
But even if it's not that simple, this was obviously someone with a knowledge of social media, someone younger, who did not have that same sense of political gamesmanship, who had just had their director fired and rehired.
Yes.
Like, this was someone who was working under a microscope.
Someone was fighting for something good.
And
absolutely.
And even if you had the sense that it probably wasn't going to go sideways on them, I'm going to tell you right now, they had no assurances of that.
No, they have no assurances. No, look, I'm not going to say there's no risk. There's risk in anything we do ever.
I think that risk was probably louder for them than it appeared to you. Talking about that objective.
I think that risk was probably fairly high. But again, you know, you're talking to someone who used to free solo, right? Like extensively, and like there's a very big difference between risk and consequence. And I do think that the risk was extremely high. I am not sure that the consequence is as high as perhaps you are painting the picture to be.
I personally do not doubt the authoritarian will to push. I don't know necessarily how well boiled the frog was. Like, maybe you're saying the frog wasn't quite that cooked yet, and I'm saying the frog in the pot that we heat up slowly, that frog. Like, and that's fine.
I
Like,
think what the consequence really is an irrevocable changing of that person's life. I do not think it is the irrevocable destruction of that person's life. And we could talk about, you know, what I feel about the political landscape at some point if you wish. Not on this podcast.
yeah.
But what I will say about this, and this is the one thing that I will say, is that without giving any opinions about how I feel about Elon Musk or Trump, regardless of what anyone wants to say about what Elon Musk has done to the app formerly known as Twitter,
Or the
kind of
business
thing.
world, or the companies he's owned, or whatever.
Well, look, Elon Musk has done some outstanding things for civilization in his life. Anyone who says differently is extraordinarily misinformed. That said, I'm not just sitting here like saying that I'm not going to be the Elon Musk bro who's like, you know, oh my God, you know, Daddy Elon and we have to follow. No, I'm not saying that. When Elon Musk says that social media platforms cannot be policing free speech, he is correct, unequivocally and without question. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that the way that that has been applied is good or appropriate or whatever.
What
But
does
that
policing
statement,
mean is the question. What does I think
correct,
every
correct.
every community has the requirement to manage their own standards, and Twitter does. They do. And and this is something we've talked about with regards to
There's a
games.
here's a problem though. Okay, and this is very much, and for what regardless of how you feel about the Hunger Games as a franchise,
Mm-hmm.
Hunger Games made a good point with this in the books, right? Remember, it was books first.
Mm-hmm.
You can make observations in books, which is that at the end of the day, when Coin takes over, right, and they completely usurp Snow and the government and all of the terrible things that was going on. And what's great about the Instigators makes this point too, actually,
Mm-hmm.
is that you're only replacing something bad with a different shade of something bad. And this is the thing. I don't care what anyone on either side of the fence thinks. It's not the content, it's the methodology that's the problem. And I can prove this like through logic-based arguments, kind of thing. What liberals think, it doesn't matter. What conservatives think, it doesn't matter. Because the problem is how both sides are going about trying to achieve their goals.
Now you have to acknowledge that at a certain point the content is the methodology, because when we make the oppression of other people
Yes.
part of our
Yes,
system.
at a certain point that is true, but also you kind of just made my point for me.
Well, I think
Because policing, and I'm not like an anarchist, I'm not a libertarian, I'm not any of that, but once you start policing anything, policing is by definition suppression of something.
now
You are drawing a limit to behavior.
and I will in any given community draw limits to behavior. I will do that. Like, and if that is policing,
Except you can't do it on people's opinions.
no, but you can do it based on standards of conduct that are acceptable or not acceptable within that community. You can enforce standards of conduct.
The issue is not what you're allowing people to do. The issue is how you are enabling them to build platforms with it, right? You cannot, I don't care what anyone says. You cannot arrest someone for going and standing on the sidewalk like in Die Hard 3, like John McClane does, wearing a sign like John McClane does. I'm not saying that that's a good thing. I'm not advocating for it. No one should have those opinions, right? Or no one should be vocalizing those opinions.
But there is also a huge difference. I think you can kick someone off Twitter for doing that. You can't arrest them. I agree with you. But look,
well, yeah, I mean, look, Twitter's a private company. It's not a government. It's not. You know, it's held to different standards.
That's right.
But you have to be so careful about policing free speech. You have to be so careful.
I think that in the wake of the Nazi collapse in Germany, one of the things that Germany got right was banning swastikas.
Yes.
You do not want to give people the tools, and
the thing.
and here's the thing: the swastika is a meme. It's just a meme. And
But
ultimately,
swastika is not free speech.
yes, it
I'm
is.
gonna. No, no. I'm gonna deliver an argument here.
According to the argument that I'm hearing, like I would agree. Like I would say there's a difference between policing free speech and maintaining standards of conduct. I would agree that there is a
Free
difference.
speech to me is the freedom to express an opinion generated of the self.
I see.
That is what it needs to be.
I here's where I
If
draw
you
the line.
are if you are recycling someone else's opinion, it is not your speech. You are parroting someone else's speech.
But you can't decide for someone else at what point they're agreeing and at what point they're parroting. And here's the point that I'm going to make. Where you draw that line, this is I've done a lot of nonprofit fundraising, and one of the groups that I've had the opportunity to do a lot of work with is the ACLU, and I've had the good fortune to be in a position to ask some really fantastic attorneys some very tough questions along these lines, because I need not just because I was curious, but also because I wanted to be able to communicate the message, right?
Yes.
At what point does the expression of one's rights become a violation of someone else's rights?
Right. Yes. And this is the point. This is the crux of it.
And according to the ACLU, and I have not found a better barometer than this, so I'm just going to stand on this line until I find a better one.
Right.
It is the point at which the expression of your rights starts harming other people. It's the point at which it's the point at which the expression of your rights takes other people's rights away.
But of course, rights are a communally agreed upon thing.
And this is where we have to exercise authority as content creators and as community builders. Because one of the things that I very intentionally put, chapter 1 of Jump Rangers, is the agreement with the community. Like, here are the things that we condone, and here are the things that we don't condone. And I work with kids in this game. So I have to be very clear and very intentional. Like, I also have to explain these rules in terms that kids will understand. And I absolutely am going to take flack for being a woke monster for what I put in those rules. It's 100% going to happen. I'm going to become an enemy of certain people. And I'm ready to pick that fight in the defense of my kids. Because...
So, and look, I think you're right about this. And I want to go back to the swastika thing real quick, because this is important, right? When Germany bans swastikas, it's important to and this is why I don't consider that a violation of free speech, okay? Because Germany is not saying that if you live in another country, you cannot fly a swastika. That would be a violation of free speech. What Germany is saying is, if you want to live in Germany and you want to be part of this community, you can't do this because we will not allow ourselves to be represented by a symbol that stands for things we don't believe in.
And at the same time, we will also not allow the viral ideas perpetuated by the symbol to reattach to our...
But a social media platform is not a state. It's not even a nation. It has no lawmaking power.
True, but it does have. It's a community.
It does. But, and this is, I'm not condoning hateful speech. I vehemently will always speak out against hateful speech because I do think it is one of the most destructive weapons in all of human history. But that said, you cannot give something that is not a state, something that has global power and influence.
The power to arrest people. I agree with that.
Power to arrest people, or the power to prevent people from creating their own communities.
I agree, but you can allow them, you can deny them the opportunity to create their community where you are. And ultimately, here's what I will say. When you build...
I don't agree with that statement.
When you build a tool for organizing people, when you organize people...
Yes.
You become responsible for their well-being.
No. I do not agree with that.
I 100% believe that.
I do not agree with that because what you're doing is you're taking the onus of being a functional, safe, healthy, rational, decent person off the person. and you're
I'm not.
putting it on someone else.
I believe that authority and that um, liability exists with all of us. When you join a community, you also are responsible for the well-being of that community. But as the first person there, you have to be conscious,
Well, you
and
have a degree of influence.
you have to be deliberate, and that influence is far greater than what anybody else. Like for example, with Blizzard Entertainment,
Okay.
you look at the chat, you look at what's going on in the community, you look what's always been going on in the community, and then you look at the allegations of rape and sexual abuse in the company.
Right.
Not disconnected.
Right.
Like
No, I'm not.
like
I don't disagree with that.
and
But
by the
also, but
so
also,
does the egg
Blizzard
create
is
the
not
chicken? Does the egg create the
video.
chicken? Yeah.
Video games in Blizzard aren't globally accessible.
Oh, hardly. Yes, they are.
No, 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 no. Not in the sense we're talking about. You're talking about the content that's being created and the way that the content is being used to perpetuate an unhealthy culture. But it doesn't. We talk
It's
about
also a medium of
think about it in
communication.
terms.
It's also a medium of
But
communication.
it's it though. It's a medium, right? And you have to think about the reach. The reach is critical here because again, when we go back to the Germany and the swastika thing, Germany is not trying to police the world. It's actually quite the opposite. Germany is only trying to police its own citizens.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Blizzard's not even trying to police its own stuff, right? And that's a problem, clearly, right? Like, I'm not saying, but whether or not Blizzard police, if Blizzard completely did a 180 and cleaned up everything all of a sudden, right? It doesn't really change the grand landscape of the world.
At what point do you think that the Nazi presence on Twitter or X, just for example,
Right.
starts suppressing black voices, starts suppressing? Do you believe that black people are in any way suppressed by the Nazis on X? In any way? Because I don't know a black person who would say that they're not, but I want to hear your take.
I would say most likely there is at least a degree of negative impact that it has just like unilaterally across the board for black people.
So at what point is Twitter failing in its obligation to allow people to express themselves by allowing other people to define the discourse in violent ways?
The issue that I see is that it's probably this is so difficult, right? Because like there is so much danger in the existence of social media for this exact reason. I can't go so far as to say that like maybe social media shouldn't exist because the truth is for every bad thing that, any platform brings about, there are good things as well. Like we don't have the Arab Spring back in like 2012 or whenever it was without Facebook. We don't. And I don't care anyone who says like, anyone wants to talk crap about Facebook and it's this terrible. No, like, and this is like the argument people make. I don't understand why athletes are paid as much as they do. I will die on a hill that athletes deserve every cent that they make. I will die on that hill all day. No, please, please, let me. But when it comes to Twitter specifically, and things where we're potentially creating platforms for hateful voices, I do kind of lean into the camp that you want those people to out themselves. Because one of the biggest problems we have had in human history is the fact that there have been all of these hateful thoughts and these prejudiced opinions, the horrible, violent things that have just been internalized.
Sure.
And it's been lingering in the shadows. And so a large part of this, and I give Elon a lot more credit than most people give him. I don't give him full credit at all, but I give him a lot more credit than people because, I mean, look, again, Russia invades the Ukraine, and what does Elon do? He turns on Starlink for Ukraine to help them survive, kind of thing. We can talk about all the things that Elon does. I think that Elon is very much trying to make the world a better place. Whether or not he's doing it in the right way, who knows, right? But the moment we talk about Twitter, the moment we talk about, at what point does giving people free speech
impact other people's free speech? Oh, you froze. We have a frozen Greg. All right. Let's see if he logs out and logs back in. Dang it. Yeah, he's cooked. That is a cooked connection. Here, let me shoot him a text. There we go. Nice try. All right. Just a second, folks. He should pop right back in. He says, here, I'm here. I think my Discord crashed. It seems likely. It seems likely.
I think my Discord must have crashed on me.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Someone doesn't like what I'm saying. my FBI agent watching me through my webcam didn't like what I had to say, I guess.
Oh my gosh.
No, I'm sorry about that. But going back to what I was saying about Twitter, and this is that the biggest thing is that you need the bad eggs to expose themselves. It's like, again, the first step in solving any problem is acknowledging that there is one.
Sure.
There is no problem to solve unless we know the people we have to. And this is the biggest thing. This is the biggest thing more than anything else. You can't help someone unless you know that they need help. And you can't help someone unless they ask for help, which is the harder problem.
Right. But let's just take that for a second. If these people
Sure.
are radicalizing people faster than they're being de-radicalized, which I do believe is happening on Twitter, I think more people.
Remember what we talked about 2 days ago, though.
What's
in
that?
terms of like the spread of the evil miasma versus the spread of the good miasma kind of thing.
And at the same time, it helps to, let's say in a community under my control, for example, in Jump Rangers, I will ban people instantly for saying the N-word. I will ban people instantly.
That's appropriate. That's appropriate.
I will ban people instantly for expressing doubt about the identities of other people in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, that's appropriate.
You have to take someone at their word. And
that's appropriate.
And I think every community has to be responsible for the maintenance of their own guidelines. And if Twitter
I see the issue here. The issue here is that you see Twitter as a community.
I do.
I don't. Twitter is not a community. This is the difference. This would be like saying that Reddit is a community. No. Subreddits are communities. And subreddits can police their own subreddits.
I understand that. I also think that the lack of community guidelines in Reddit is by design. And I think it's by design not just to quote-unquote protect free speech, but
not all. No, some communities have very strict guidelines.
Some
in Reddit.
And at the same time, Reddit is also the birthplace of modern Nazi tactics. And I have to believe that to some degree, the tech bro culture that gave rise to Reddit is not a bug. It's not a bug. It's a feature.
Look, I have to put the reality check stamp on this real quick, which is that it is a delusion to imagine that the problem of Nazism, and I will say that, like, I am very much anti-Nazism.
Of course you are. Yeah.
The problem of Nazism is not something that goes away overnight. It's not something that goes away in our lifetimes.
No. But if our communities are lending themselves to the growth, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I apologize.
No, but this is my point, right? This idea that we as individuals can fix problems that are systemic is outrageous. It's absolutely asinine. All we can do as individuals is be the best individuals we can be, and give good, healthy data and information and practices. and lead by example.
I
We
agree.
cannot
with
try
that.
to, we cannot limit others. We cannot try to control others. All we can do, and this is why we need to reward good behavior. This right here is why good behavior needs to be rewarded in addition to perhaps punishing bad behavior. But like, you cannot just only punish bad behavior and assume that everything will work itself out. This is the reason, because once you start rewarding good behavior, and this is why I'm going to say certain businesses are far more successful than other businesses, like Google.
I agree.
And stuff like that. Because, look, there was a girl I was dating for a while who is now a senior computer programmer, senior systems programmer for Google in Manhattan. Okay? I have been to the Google building in Manhattan. I have been to the Facebook building in Cambridge, Massachusetts, because I have a friend who used to work there as well. Let me tell you, there's a lot of incentive to work there and stay there. They don't want employee turnover. They want, and like, look, you're from the Northeast, right? Harvard did a study on the business model of Market Basket, which for those of you who don't know, is a regional supermarket to the Northeast. Like, kind of like how Vons would be in California and stuff like that, right? Or what's the Publix in the Southeast kind of thing. And it's also like the In-N-Out burger model, right? We're going to pay our people more, way more than minimum wage, and reward them for kicking ass in their jobs. And make sure that they know they are appreciated, not just with ridiculous corporate pizza parties once a year, but with things that will enable them to be better in their own personal lives. That is how to do it. And it is not, and I'm sorry, right? It goes both ways with propaganda.
Yeah.
And it is. If you are trying to preach that, that we need to systemically censor and silence the bad voices, you are preaching propaganda. One way or the other.
See this, but we are dealing with a fundamental. Our difference of opinion here is in the definition of what a social media network is. And so we
perhaps
agree,
yes.
We agree on all principles.
We agree on the moral principles, I think.
And it's just a question of at where does that liability lie in any given environment, is where we're but here's
my argument is that positive change can only be done through osmosis. That is my argument. It cannot be done through force or censorship.
And I'm not suggesting that the primary value of restricting, let's say, hate speech on Twitter is I'm not suggesting that the primary value of that is that it forces people to behave better. That is not what I'm suggesting.
Okay.
What I am suggesting is that it limits the exposure of vulnerable people to that hate speech.
I won't even disagree with that. My point is that, and I just hate saying this. You
don't say it if you hate saying it.
You can't win them all.
I understand that, but Elon Musk could have.
And look, I agree with you that I think the whole idea of like, oh, you have to, in order to make an omelet, you have to break a few eggs. I'm not saying that that's true, right? And that's why I didn't say it like that.
He didn't want to lose the audience that would have left because of the hate speech. That's why he didn't do it. I wanted to protect.
No, you know what? I'm not going to say I know what he wanted. I'm not going to say I know what he wanted. And I think it is an error for anyone to say they know what he wanted. I genuinely think that is an error. For any of us to assume we know what Elon Musk's intent is really narcissistic. It's really egotistical. There is no possible way we can know that. We can make perhaps very, informed, educated guesses. Okay. But that doesn't mean that we're right. And the thing that that is important to understand is we cannot assume any individual is like us. And that is a huge fallacy that a lot of people forget, because everyone wants to be part of something. Everyone wants to be included. I'm not even going to say that that's a bad thing. I don't think it is a bad thing to want to be part of a togetherness, right? But we cannot forget individuality and autonomy. We cannot forget individuality and
I
autonomy. And so
absolutely agree. I absolutely agree.
to assume that we know what Elon Musk is thinking, what Elon Musk's intentions are, is bad. That is counterproductive, and it is an unhealthy way of thinking about things.
I agree with you on that point. I think you understand. I think you understand where I see the accountability in this
I
situation.
know,
And
and
here,
I don't.
let me
It's,
let
it's
me let me
more morally, it's so difficult
let
because
me
I
bring it
don't disagree on a moral basis.
let me bring it back to civilization.
Yeah,
Let me bring it back
yeah, yeah.
because the truth is what we have illustrated here
Yeah.
is that at any given point in any given civilization, you're going to have people vying for different futures or different approaches to the same future or whatever the
Methods
case,
of control.
methods of control or
Yeah.
methods of or even just methods of progress. You're going to have people and you're going to have people trying to harness all those different methods in one direction or another. You're going to have people resisting that harnessing. That's how we got on the subject of rogue NASA. Was you had someone saying, "But these are my ethics, and this is how it's going to go," and like,
You
and
know, I have a way to pose this as a thought question without making it political, because it was a topic I was actually talking about with my poker playing friend that I told you about. At one point, we were talking about the ethics of eating meat, kind of thing.
okay,
And his argument is that an individual, not society, but an individual should not eat meat, because the way that the meat industry works is that it is extremely abusive and tortuous to animals, and
bad for
that
the
by eating
environment.
meat, bad for the environment, and that by eating meat you are perpetuating that. My point in this is that, and again, I'm only speaking as an individual, not as a society. I think as a society, we were collectively all to stop eating meat, probably better things happen. But that how do you affect that change, right? And his argument is that, like, well, if individuals stop doing it, then the industry suffers. If the industry suffers, just as from a purely capitalist standpoint, if it's not making money, it will stop, because the people who are putting money into it will find other things to put their money into, kind of
We
thing.
know that's not true because we've had these kinds of
Yes.
shifts. Like,
yes, and that's my argument, which is that, like, an individual has no influence over anything.
Oh, I disagree. I think that individual. So let's take examples of McDonald's, which is a company that has been suffering because people are saying there's better options out there, and then
Right.
we have government subsidies and all kinds of like.
That doesn't have to do with the ethics of eating meat, though. That has to do with the health debate more than anything
But it is
else.
a public pressure on a private company, and
Yes.
and we have public figures saying that there is a moral obligation. Like this whole conversation about how there's too much avocado toast, like that we're getting from certain politicians, comes from.
But where does the pressure come from, though? And this is the key thing to delineate here.
And
the pressure isn't coming from individuals.
The pressure is coming from a large number of individuals who have.
No, it's coming from platforms. It's coming from collectives, single identities, made up of individuals, yes, but it's coming from single things. And so this is kind of my point.
I disagree.
I think there is only, like, other than the Arab Spring, I think that there is only one example in the last 20 years of individuals collectively coming together without a pre-existing platform to affect policy change.
I disagree entirely. I think every pre-existing platform is the product of individuals earlier in the chain. I think that who are already on that thing, whatever it happens to be. So I would say, and this isn't just me hypothesizing. This is my background as a fundraiser speaking. Like every single nonprofit organization, every single one, started because someone found a solution to a problem that they were already trying to solve, and that solution became institutionalized over time. So ultimately, like systems function.
No. We agree on that point, but there is no denying that at a certain point, the individual stops mattering, and the entity becomes the flag bearer for whatever it is.
I think the entity exists.
The ACLU is not any individual at this point. At this point, right? Like, sure, when it was founded.
Oh no, it definitely is. I could like even corporations are individuals, like in the sense that there are people running.
If the president of the ACLU were to disappear tomorrow, you would find a new head of the ACLU, and the ACLU would persevere. It's bigger than any one person.
It is, It is bigger than any one person, but it is not
Yeah.
bigger than the collaboration of the people who run it.
No, I agree with that. But
and
that collaboration, again, it's a critical mass thing, right? We talk about things like that go viral on the internet.
yeah,
At a certain point, you don't need individual effort anymore.
I think the ACLU is just a tool built by certain individuals to accomplish a certain goal, and those people have pulled in more people using that tool. I think the fundraising branch of the ACLU is a tool. I think the whole thing is
Yeah.
just tool sets. And I think that the methodology by which that tool functions does become institutionalized at a certain point in time, but that only makes the tool easier for people to use. It's still just a tool being used by individuals.
No, you just hit it though. But that's the point. It's the ease. Ease is the key element in all of this because the vast majority of the public does not remember. It's like we said. It's they look at that mountain and how steep it is, the path to self improvement, and it's terrifying.
Yep.
So people are looking for easy ways to justify the status quo and still self validate. So once you once you make something like that become easy and accessible, that's when it doesn't, the individual efforts don't matter as much. Yes, they still matter. I won't say that they don't matter. Of course, they still matter.
Every
but
system functions on complicity. Every single system functions on complicity. And if you incentivize the complicity, you do create a feedback loop there that keeps people tied into the system. But the more people break that feedback loop and take ownership of their own complicity, the harder the system is to manage. And people get to control the ease. Individual people get to control the ease, and they get to pick their battles. And this is where
I think they only get to pick their battles for themselves. You can't pick anyone else's battle.
You get to, by shifting your focus and by shifting the systems that you utilize, and also the systems that you disregard, and also the systems that you build. Okay, so there's basically these, and the systems you destroy. There's 4 relationships to have with a system. You use it, you don't use it. You build one, you destroy one. Those are the only really things people can do with systems, and to varying degrees in every case. You can do more than one at the same time. You see what I'm saying? Like, all of that is true. But to the degree that you do these things, certain systems become easier to use and certain systems become harder to use. Jump Rangers is a system of play. That's what it is. It's a system of play and a system of communication. Because craft and community. That's what I do. Right? So it's both of those things. Now, building it makes it easier for other people to use it. Pulling people in and getting other people to understand how to use it also makes it easier for other people to use it, because now there's a support network and the system is becoming streamlined. So the more people I get playing Jump Rangers, the easier it gets for other people to play Jump Rangers. The more I showcase how, and this is just a microcosm, of course, right? But every single person who plays this game makes it easier for the next person to play the game. And that started with me. In a similar way, I have fired certain entertainment entities from my life because I don't like who's running them, or what have you.
Well, we've had that discussion about like doing this. I'm sorry. I have to pause for a second. I have to use the bathroom.
Yeah, I'll do the same. I'll do the same.
Give me 1 second. I'm very sorry.
Test, test. I'm back. I'm back. We'll wait for Greg, but we're in business. This is a rip roaring. This is a barn burner. to be honest, to be honest, I kind of knew like the game is called Civilization. It's supposed to be about the advancement of the human potential, right? Or conquest or whatever. It's about it's about systemic thought. It's about systems. There was no way we were going to avoid all this stuff. This was always going to be part of the conversation. And and that's part of what makes it interesting. And it's interesting to me that the game in so many ways sidesteps so many of these conversations, but you can't. You have to know where you stand when it comes to these issues to make this movie because actors are real people and we see real people on the screen. When I first started playing Civ, it was a pixelated caricature of Ivan the Terrible or whatever, or Stalin, whoever was on the screen at the time. And they would show you this person and be like, there's an emissary from so and so, right? And you've got that person sort of like pixelated, sprite, a cartoon, basically, telling you what they want or making threats or whatever it was that they were doing. I don't even necessarily remember how it all came together, but and so that doesn't create much room for the conversation because the format of the game was so simple and so rudimentary in terms of the depth with which it can communicate to the player. um, there wasn't a lot of room for this kind of conversation, but I don't think today we can avoid it. And I think that, as we've discussed with Greg, these are themes that we don't necessarily wind up exploring overtly. I think that these are themes that we wind up exploring in the subtext of how certain characters pursue certain goals. It's not our job to say, Rush is the bad guy, in the movie, so much as it's our job to observe with the camera the ways in which the characters build their civilization and advance the goals of diplomacy, war, and scientific exploration through the context of the face and the ideology and the systems of power, the loops that they build early on and that they rely on through the development of that civilization. And there's ways to arrive at that in a pulpier, more entertaining way, but you're still dealing with characters trying to achieve those goals using those tools. And I think that, through the movie or through the television show or whatever it ends up being, you wind up with a more the opportunity to look deeper and see and judge for yourself what it means that certain characters are doing certain things in certain ways. You're allowed to look into it and say, well, they're doing this because of this, they're doing this because of that. And if you stay true to the actions of the characters and the tools that they have to achieve those actions, then there will be an underlying internal logic to how and why characters do things when they do them in order to achieve those goals. And that becomes something that you can explore even if the movie is fun, even if the movie is
Okay, I'm back.
Hey there.
Oh, the backwards hat.
Oh yeah, this is Evan got me this. Have I shown you? It's a Avengers hat.
Love it.
It's super
Backwards hat.
It's the texture, and also Tecker10 is my gamer tag. If people don't know.
Sure.
So I went on a rant while you were gone just to fill the space. But basically, what I said was that this game is civilization. We had to this stuff was unavoidable. These are what we're basically talking about is the nature of progress and the nature of human development and the problems that arise in it. And even if the movie winds up being a little bit more pulpy to reflect the tone of the game, even if that's the direction we choose to go,
right,
knowing where we stand on these issues and understanding the complexities of how certain tools get built in the first place and then used for goals after that. Because let's just use Twizzler just as an example. Like it was originally built by Jack, right? Because he wanted X and Y and Z to be able to do, and then it was purchased for other reasons. We don't need to necessarily sit here and debate what those reasons were, but it was purchased for a different reason than it was built.
Oh, for sure.
Inevitably, because they're two different people, and then utilized for those goals. And maybe it was purchased in order because someone saw an opportunity to protect the legacy, or maybe it was purchased to achieve other goals. Who knows? But at the end of the day, you're seeing systems built in order to achieve X and then used. And that's the kind of evolution that we're talking about over the course of the series. And I think that knowing the depths of these processes.
For just for one quick note on argument here. Remember that despite how much he was trolling, Elon didn't actually want to buy Twitter. When it came down to it, they had to take him to court and hold him to like kind of verbal agreements that were publicly made, kind of thing.
Which
he didn't actually want to buy it.
You know what?
Yeah, I know. It's ridiculous. The whole thing was ridiculous.
I think that there is a fundamental issue with the billionaire cast, and
well, yes,
and
there is undoubtedly a vast disconnect.
And when we look at Elon's own personal history, I think there's probably also fundamental disconnects on the issue of race and on the issue of
I don't know.
Like,
I mean,
I've known a lot.
Again,
I've known. You know that I've known my share of South Africans.
Hey, look, I have met his sister. I worked for his sister.
That's very interesting.
Did I tell you about this?
No.
Do you know about this?
No.
The day I got my third SAG waiver by doing background to get into the union, I was doing background on this passion project of hers, like adapting this like smut novel into a movie. And I don't know, I mean, again, it's a billionaire family, so I'm sure like she had the money. It's just like adapting because she wanted to, so she was directing this movie. And I have met and shook Tosca Musk's hand in person, kind of thing.
Let me put it to you this way. I have never met a South African in person who did not, at some point in my relationship with them, tell me with a straight face.
Don't be racist. Don't be racist. Okay.
Tell me with a straight face. I've never met a white South African not tell me with a straight face that racism no longer exists in South Africa.
All right.
It hasn't happened yet, and I've known my share. Now,
that's a really interesting. Here's the funny thing.
Retract that. I've seen people retract that later. Like certain people have been like, you know what, racism does in fact exist in South Africa. But
for starters, I'm going to say this straight out: every single person on the planet has a degree of racism coded in.
That's correct. That is correct.
And I got into this I have this childhood friend who I absolutely adore, right? And we were getting into this big argument about racism. Mm-hmm. And I was like, dude, that's a racist thing to say. And he was like, what are you talking about? I'm not a racist. I was like, all right, for starters, stop. Okay? Because one, it is a racist thing to say. But just because you say a racist thing, it doesn't actually make you like a categorical racist.
I'm not saying you're a bad person. I'm saying you're
and it also doesn't. It's not a commentary on the value of your character, because like
it's just a statement of fact, dude. It's just
we all have horrible thoughts from time to time. We all think detestable, reprehensible things, and it comes down to whether or not we act on them.
I have come to understand it this way, and I have found it to be a very useful mental exercise regardless of how people feel about it. Okay?
Yeah.
And it came to me during the Black Lives Matter protests and reading all the shit that was on Twitter about the Black Lives Matter protests. And there came again, raised by a drunk, I came to a certain point where I was like, this is just my drunk mom. I came to a point where I was like, I'm not as bad as the other guys, so stop giving me shit. I can stop anytime I want. It's all the same list. It's the same exact rationalizations. It's literally the same rationalizations.
Wait, how does this correlate to Black Lives Matter?
Because that's what the white people were saying about their issues with. You can't come at me for being racist.
Oh, right. And for anyone listening, this is also very much a Boston thing. Boston has been shown through observational data gathered by Harvard.
One of the most racist cities in the country.
No. Not one of. The most racist city in the Boston, Massachusetts. And here's the thing. Yeah. And this is why a little bit I really push back on your Twitter thing. It's because the reason that Boston is the most racist city in the country is because it's filled with people who aren't aware of not only their internal things, but the internal things of the people around them. I strongly believe that it's because the issue is hidden rather than in plain sight.
I would argue systemically that this problem, and I'm not saying necessarily that it's not. I think communication is a good thing in general, and we need to be able to see.
Yes.
But I think very specifically this problem, not just in Boston, but in cities in the Northeast in particular, like New York as well, Baltimore certainly. It is a segregation problem because when slavery ended and people came north, we put them in ghettos, and
Well, yeah, we went from slavery to segregation.
I think
that was a big problem.
And specifically, segregation in northeastern cities involved the designation of certain parts of town for, like, they got crowded into projects and this and that, and that was the isolating factor. And this is
also like, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Sid Meier is the author of The Strange Career of Jim Crow. And
okay.
And the thesis of the book, which is widely regarded as really good, as I understand it, decolonization text, like fundamental to our understanding of how this works. The thesis of the book is that modern racism, as we understand it, actually came from the North. There was a different kind of racism.
Actually came from the what?
The North.
I believe that.
Modern racism, as we understand it today, is a product of segregation rather than slavery. Not that slavery didn't hugely.
This is actually, I think, one of the reasons that there is still so much strife between like conservative culture and liberal culture, and I'll even take it far between Democrats and Republicans, kind of thing. The North and the South. Look, I have been to every single state in the continental U.S., all 48 of them. And the country's way too big, right? Like, it's really like 7 countries all mashed into one.
That's also proven to be a fact.
But here's the thing. Here's my point. I have been everywhere. I have been in some of the poorest parts of this country, parts where I have actually been a little fearful for my safety. And like, me, that's a big task for someone like me.
Yeah.
And I don't encounter people that strike me as any less human than anywhere else.
Yes.
Regardless of what flags they fly, regardless of what color their skin is, regardless of what they think or what they feel. Most of the time, especially when I'm in the South, where it's filled with a lot of political ideology that I don't agree with, the people are nicer than the people up here. Kind of thing. And they are friendlier. I feel more welcomed. I feel more valid as an individual when even though these people are surrounded and it may probably even hold these really destructive thoughts and opinions, and it doesn't have to do with it.
It's
I'm going to end up going down the rabbit hole if I keep on this. But
but here's the I think that point was very well illustrated in Sarah Silverman's show on Hulu, which I forget what it was called.
The Silverman Show?
No, it was like God Save America or something like that, or something.
I don't know it.
It had 2 seasons. It was a short-lived show, but it was basically Sarah trying to make friends with people that she doesn't like. Like most of the show was about that. And
I've gotten good at that, by the way.
And she turned it into a performance, which I thought was really smart. And
that's almost kind of like a little bit like, forgive me for saying it, but like Borat.
Yeah,
like
a little bit.
It's a little bit like Borat,
without the false flag.
Right, without the false flags. That's the thing. But like, still, I mean,
did you ever see? Let me ask you this question. Did you ever see Sacha Baron Cohen's Israeli defense contractor who got Mitch McConnell on camera saying, yes, we should arm the children in the schools as a solution?
Was this part of The Dictator, or was this something else?
No, this was a TV show that he did.
No, I never saw this.
He played an Israeli arms specialist hanging out with conservatives, pushing his program of arming the bright kids, arming the right ones, getting them just introduced to the idea of weapons. And he got Mitch McConnell on camera saying, yeah, I think it's a really good idea to start arming children in schools as a solution to gun violence.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know. Maybe my stance
Chef kiss.
about allowing like free speech to be a thing on Twitter, maybe that's analogous to like the way we fix gun violence is by arming, schools kind of thing. And that would terrify me if that's actually like that analogous correlation is actually accurate. I would be very worried about myself.
I think
I
I
would have
think
to do
that
some hard self-evaluation. But
I think that those ideas get embedded. I think that we take an ethical stance based on sometimes assumptions, and
right,
and those assumptions are baked into our, like, as capitalists, we have so many negative assumptions about the nature of corporate ebb and flow. And and
sure,
and for example, like you said, this idea that, like, you stop feeding an animal and it dies. No, someone else feeds it. Like, they find the food somewhere and they give
right,
it to
right,
the,
right,
like
right, right. Yeah,
like we have these ideas about how systems of power, um, give and take, and the truth of the matter is that that only happens well when everyone in the system is accountable, and that has to start, in my judgment, with the people who create the system. They have to be the most accountable.
I mean, personally, I've always viewed guns as like a special case. It's guns, specific, not all weapons, but guns
Mm-hmm.
specifically, because to me, a gun is only a weapon that is used to destroy. It's not a tool, right? Like a bow.
Ah, I see. It's a
Here's the
hunting
thing.
weapon. It's a hunting. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Well,
Or it's even just used. It's actually.
even like a bow and arrow you can use to send messages. A knife can be used to help construct shelter. Kind of thing.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
a gun's only function
It's to be
is to
efficient at killing.
is
It's to be
to
efficient.
destroy. Well, to destroy.
Yep.
To destroy the thing you are shooting at,
Yep.
whether it is anything else. And this is the thing: we have fetishized destruction
Yes.
into something,
Yes.
and destruction is the antithesis of health and good behavior and all this. We are as humans, we are creators. That doesn't mean that we are artistically creative, but we are creators.
We make
Our
we're
very
makers. We make stuff.
existence, right? We're makers. Our very existence is proof of that. We are, again, we're the universe experiencing itself.
Yep.
Our existence is sheer proof that we are creators and we are makers. We are not destroyers.
That's very interesting. I see your point. Now,
A gun's only function,
Yep. Yep.
is to destroy.
And I would argue that certain ideas, certain memes in particular, have the
Yes.
same function. And I would say
What
that
else though? Like that's and this is my point with Twitter.
the N-word,
Twitter's
the
only
N-word
function
exists. The N-word exists only to destroy.
No. It probably was created with that intention. But to say that still, because you cannot argue that black culture has done its part to make it their own.
I agree with that, but I do think it is.
When a white person says it, yes, I will agree with you 100%.
And I think
not when a black person says
it. Yes, I'm speaking to you from that frame of reference, and in terms of, for example, how I enforce my community.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying?
But this is important because we cannot superimpose our own identity over the world.
You're right.
We can't do it.
That is you make a very good point.
Yeah.
It doesn't change the rule. It offers an exception. And ultimately, to me, that's the important thing to understand. Is like, yes, that's an edge case, but systemically speaking, like,
I don't think it's an edge case. I think that it's a word that is commonplace in black culture, or at least I won't say it still is. When I was growing up, it very much was.
Right.
So,
but what I'm saying is,
the great comedians like Chris Rock and
yes,
and Eddie Murphy.
But as a programmer,
right?
If you're going to build a social media network,
yes,
then police the word and allow people to secure exceptions based on their cultural whatever. Like, that's great. I think that
I don't believe in police the thing. I believe in police the person.
Well, that's fine too. But what I'm saying,
that's just so much more work. That's the thing.
It is. It is.
I understand that it's like in many cases it's not currently practical given what we have.
And the
But
way to achieve
one
that
of
from a
the
systemic viewpoint is to flag the bird, and then if the case needs to be reviewed, you review it. And I think
well, yes, and I mean, but that's also again like that's kind of how a lot of things are done. We automate processes until they need to be reviewed,
yes,
and I agree that that is probably like the path we are all on. And I was actually thinking about this. This is actually a great tie-in to Civilization as an adaptation of
I
the
absolutely
game.
agree. I absolutely agree.
Because what I was thinking about this is like one of the things I have wrestled with as an artist, and I do see myself as an artist, and I hope you see yourself as an artist, kind of thing, is that I find it really rare to encounter a human being who doesn't have some degree of artistic inspiration within them.
Yes.
Whether it's music or performative or competitive or whatever, right? And it doesn't have to be art or music or sculpture or writing. It doesn't matter. There are a multitude of infinite complexities to creating art, right?
Yep.
But every single person I have ever encountered in my life has some degree of it. It can be really small, but it's there. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking about it. I was like, I do kind of subscribe to the. I believe I first heard it from Robin Williams. I can't credit him with the original, saying or phrase or whatever, but it's it is very much the Dead Poets Society idea of like business, medicine, law. These are critical things, important to the our ongoing survival. But poetry, beauty, romance, love. These are what we live for. And I do believe that, right? Okay. Like science and technology they are critical. We need them in order to survive and how we live. But there's no point, again, if we don't have art, then we're just robots. And so we need art in order to, like, these are the things, this is the beauty that makes life worth living. And so thinking about it in that frame, I was like, well, like, everyone can't be an artist. This is an unfortunate truth, right? And actually, if anyone is out there, or you yourself, if you have ever read the books of Babel, which are a wonderful steampunk fantasy series by Josiah Bancroft, it's 4 books. The 4th one really shows us this society. It's the society at the very top of the tower. We get to see the society at the very top of the tower. That because they are at the top of the tower, and it's like the higher up you get, typically like the nicer life is, kind of thing. It's a society where all of the other levels are serving that level, so they can literally spend every waking moment of their lives in pursuit of art, kind of thing. And it's created this really fucked up and dystopic society because they don't have an understanding of, work ethic and labor and, the fact that in order to value something, you need to have put effort into something, kind of thing. So they don't appreciate their way of life because they don't work for their way of life. So you can't just have a society of nothing but artists. I get that. But for what it is for me, what I think the solution is that we need to accept the automation of the menial tasks.
Yeah. Yep.
And this is a thing, like, I understand there's been this huge outcry about, like, McDonald's going fully automated with, like, now you don't speak to a human, you order at a computer. We don't pay cashiers at Walmart anymore. It's self-checkout and things like that. And I'm sitting here, I'm like, I think this is necessary to the progress of civilization.
The problem is who's doing it and how they're doing it. Like you said,
and how the profitability of it is being handled. That's an issue. Absolutely. But ultimately, we need people to not have to do those jobs so that we can free people to do better jobs.
And
that, I think, is what
we're not freeing
right.
them to do better jobs.
We're not freeing them. We are, in fact, finding ways to further imprison them through the methods of capitalism. But the truth is that it's so important to differentiate the thing from the utilization.
I agree.
Which is, kind of the Oppenheimer story.
It's not a bad tool. It's just being used in bad ways.
But this is the whole thing. Oppenheimer didn't invent the nuclear bomb. Oppenheimer invented the technology that was used to make the nuclear bomb.
Right.
And science and technology is not inherently evil. You cannot if you're Oppenheimer, right? And I believe this was actually a conversation Oppenheimer had in real life, where he was having huge moral misgivings and feeling like he was going to be responsible for these horrible atrocities. And it had to be made, the point had to be made to him that he is not at fault because he is not the person who used the technology in that way.
At the same time,
had he not invented it, it didn't matter because someone else would have invented it.
Maybe. And I think
no, someone else
maybe
would
not.
have invented
It might not have been the same device. It might not have been. My point.
You got to remember that at that point in time, there were a dozen countries racing for the technology. Someone would have got there.
My point is, it is to his credit that he made that observation. I think two things can be true at the same time. I think both of those observations.
Well, duality is totally a thing.
And I think that it's interesting to theory craft what history might have been if he had gotten there 2 years earlier and said and had that moment. I think that we learn as we go. I think we learn as we go.
That is a terrifying prospect to me.
I understand why
I think things would be way worse if he had gotten there 2 years earlier.
I think that being raised in New England by my parents, I think I had a very bleak view of Japanese
future?
culture and one of the things that was interesting about being really in the 80s is that we were very much in the Cold War. I was having nuke drills in school. I was having all this and that. And so much of the world never.
Yeah, the Cuban Missile Crisis was before I was born, I believe, actually.
Yep. And it was very alive for me, the idea that we were all just going to be done.
People tend to forget that we put Japanese people in internment camps.
Yes.
We did to the Japanese. Maybe we didn't. I don't believe we mass murdered them. Although that might have been that might be lost to history. It might have happened and we just don't know about it.
Well, let me tell you this.
We put Japanese people in camps the way that the Nazis put Jews in camps.
In World War II.
Yeah.
In World War II, U.S. naval ships went throughout the Aleutian Islands and picked up all of the indigenous people in the middle of winter in the Aleutian Islands. The entire population of the Aleutic people and everybody who was further south than them. All of the nations that lived in those islands. And transported them. And there was tons of people. I don't know the numbers. But
against their will to something in America? Because that's never happened before in American history, right?
And moved them to specifically 5 camps.
Yeah.
With shelter for a few hundred people. And a container full of Spam. And all of the elderly and all of the young died.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
And all of these nations, and they separated families. They didn't give a shit who was with who. They just shoved them off the boats into 5 separate camps.
It's the dehumanization thing that we've talked about. They just don't see them as human.
Evan's grandparents met because they were shoved onto the same boat, and they spent the rest of their lives looking for their families.
And never found them, right?
Actually, they did. But because there was only 5 places. But it did take time, and it destroyed 3 or 4 nations completely, in the process. And so yes, mass murder in World War II.
Genocide. Call it what it is.
It was a genocide that we did in putting aside whether or not the Japanese had a genocide in World War II, the United States military 100% did. And that's obviously not something we learned in the history books.
We can just look at the Vietnam War.
Yep.
This is a point. I'm not the biggest fan of Noam Chomsky, but he has really good, smart, intelligent, and apt things to say about the Vietnam War. Do you know why the United States got involved in the Vietnam War? Actually, not the reasons that were propagandized to everyone about communism. It had nothing to do with communism.
I can't say that I do.
It has nothing to do with communism. It has to do with the fact that Vietnam was doing something that America didn't like. America said, knock it off, and Vietnam said no.
I see.
And that America had to put its money where its mouth was and show the world that if you said no to America, this was the price you were going to pay, and that we didn't care how many of our own citizens we sacrificed in the name of being the cosmic nanny of the world.
I see.
It was about proving a point on the global geopolitical landscape.
I see.
Nothing else.
I see.
And that, when you think about it in terms like that, it almost makes me sick to be an American.
Yeah.
Almost.
Yep.
Not quite, because I still love this country for many of the beautiful and good things about it. But really, the history of this country is mired in blood.
Yep.
And corruption and ill intent.
Yep.
And anyone who thinks otherwise is deluding themselves.
Yep.
But
to
that
a purpose,
doesn't...
they're deluding themselves specifically to get money
Yes.
and power. That's the reason you're
Right.
deluding yourselves. Like,
Oh, well,
let's be
no.
clear.
I mean, yes, that can absolutely be true, especially like in upper classes. But don't forget, like there is a whole subset of lower caste and class people
Right.
in this country who are proud to be patriots because they have been brainwashed to think that.
And what keeps them proud and what keeps that cycle going is the idea that if somebody has it worse than them, things
Yes.
are going to work out for them. It is about
This
getting
is-
it
this
is about
is
getting money and
why-
power. It's just about getting pitiful amounts of it. Like,
This is why I refuse to listen to people who want to tell me about news headlines.
yeah, I get that.
Because mass media doesn't succeed as a business without bad news. It does not. Because people are more concerned about hearing about all the terrible things happening to other people so that they can self-validate while maintaining status quo.
There was a time when the news was a nonprofit effort.
I agree.
And that was
So, and this is what Aaron Sorkin's, or not, well, Aaron Sorkin's screenwriting, but what Jeff Daniels in the newsroom speaks to in that world famous monologue he has in that first episode of the newsroom, where like we sure used to be. We were able to be these things and do those things because we were informed by great men who were revered.
It is great.
And now,
it is great.
Aside the fact that they use the word men instead of great people, which
Yep.
I think it should be great people, because you again, like, you cannot discredit Susan B. Anthony, you cannot discredit Marie Curie, you cannot discredit all the great women throughout history.
We say men because we feel a sense of glory and empowerment in that word.
Well, when we hear that, we think like Winston Churchill, you know,
we need
and
to find a word that we feel
FDR.
that way about, that includes people. Because if we can, and this is how systems of power, this is the problem, right? If we find a word, if we can learn to say people in a way that means fucking people, like, if
it's
we can,
not the word isn't people, though. I know what the word is, but people are afraid of the word.
Humans? What's the word?
The word is leaders.
There you go. Well, not just leaders, but in this case, in the case of his speech, yes, that's the word.
It is leaders, because the important thing is to be able to differentiate between leaders and managers and bosses.
I agree, but I also want to acknowledge that people can be heroes and not see themselves as leaders.
Leadership is not a self identity thing. Leadership is a mantle bestowed upon someone who is doing something right. Now,
it's
like,
a good word.
In the case of things like filmmaking, it's a little bit more muddled than that, because obviously, especially like indie filming, like me, I'm the leader of my project, but I'm the leader of my project because I put myself in that position, right? Like no one elected me, no one picked me to be the leader. But here's the thing about it: even though I put myself in that position, there is no way I will retain the people who are under me unless I am a good, efficient leader.
That's true.
Or unless I'm just paying them egregious sums of money.
By the way, paying people egregious sums of money is a great way to establish your leadership. Like, there's no reason not to do that. Like,
no, I'm going to disagree with that. Paying people egregious sums of money is a great way to not be a leader.
I don't know about that. I think that taking care of
the problem is that the mindset, especially in capitalism, right, is that paying people egregious sums of money is a substitute for being a leader.
Oh, I'm not saying it's the only tool in the toolbox. I'm not saying you can.
You have to reward people for their excellence. You have to. I'm never going to stop it. You have to reward people for their excellence.
And you have to support them in their excellence too. They need
yes,
all the resources
as well.
They need all the resources to do what they're doing freely. Like they need
so
all the
you do
resources.
Still have to give them money, right? You do still have to pay them money. You absolutely do. But you can't do that and not be a good leader.
I agree with that. And
that's the important distinction that I felt the need to make there. So and this is the thing. It's leadership. If we don't respect and the word here is honor.
Mm-hmm.
We don't. There is such a little sense of honor in so many of the societies in today's world anymore. This is why, really, when anyone tries to talk shit about sports to me, I point to the Olympics and I go, "You shut your mouth. Yeah. I am not going to have this conversation with you." The Olympics has ended wars. Yeah. The World Cup has ended wars. I don't want to hear a goddamn word about athletes are overpaid. You know who's overpaid? You know who's overpaid? The people who sign the athletes' checks. That's who's overpaid. Okay?
Have we talked about my definition of culture on the stream? Have we done that?
I don't know. I think we have, but remind me because I don't remember it off the top of my head.
Culture is the sum total of the experiences that we can choose to have.
Yes. You have said that. Yes.
On this stream.
I don't know if it's been on. You and I have definitely had that conversation.
We have.
But
so the idea is that giving people an experience in common, forcing them to have an experience in common, doesn't give them any sort of common bond. But when people,
correct,
because the fact
because choice matters.
Choice matters. When people, and the reason why it matters is because when people choose to do things the same way or they choose to do the same thing, you can make certain assumptions and
you can make informed choices.
But
yourself.
You know where those choices are coming from in the other person, at least to a degree. You say, oh, this person is watching Star Trek. They probably like mathematics, or they probably like science, or they probably like exploration. And you can, based on that...
And this is why you can't censor Twitter. This is the whole... You just landed on the root of my argument for this is why you can't censor Twitter. Because you have to be able to see it. You have to be able to identify those pockets.
My point is, Twitter is already censored. Just not consciously. And the issue is that Twitter is censored. Like, there's no black culture on Twitter anymore. There's no...
It's censored by a collective.
Yes. And that collective is either acting in the best interest of the overall Twitter community or they are not. And it is up
to... then we start diving into like a really deep philosophical hole, which is like, look, I can sit here and I can say that destruction is antithetical to the human experience, but at the end of the day, that is only my opinion, right? I can't empirically, factually, navigate that. I can't, what's the word? Validate that, right? Like, because it is a subjective opinion. And so as much as, like, it really is disgusting to say it, but, like, we have agreed pretty much as, like, an entire civilization that, murder is bad. Right? Like murder, no good. No one should be like people who commit murder go to jail. Right? Like that's the thing. But what if we had, as a culture, decided that it's like, and what, like, let's say, just hypothetically, that we knew there was more to life than just this experience, and that at the end of this life we go on and live another life. Maybe we don't think that murder is like really as reprehensible of an offense as we do, and then maybe as a culture we agree that murder isn't. Like maybe murder is tolerable. Which is like a horrible thing to think about. And I don't think that, even in the slightest bit. But there is a degree, I do think that there is an objective layer to the universe. I don't think that objectivity is just the sum aggregate mean of all subjective opinions and experiences. But that doesn't mean that there isn't an element of communal subjectivity that carries weight, kind of thing.
I will say this.
Remember, that I think we're all kind of like lower level hive mind.
I get that.
We're all kind of vibrating together at a certain point.
There is, again, the ACLU boundary that I will apply to this situation. Our rights end where we start infringing on the rights of others. I don't play Blizzard games because I, as a cripple, do not want to engage the Blizzard community.
Sure.
And Blizzard says, "Oh, that's not. We are here for everyone." No, you're not. No, you're not.
Look. Your point of not doing it for yourself, 100% valid. Blizzard's point that they get to say that they're not, even though, like, let's be fair, they are. Like they're allowed to say that.
They're allowed to say that, but it is not. It is disingenuous, even if they don't know it. And ultimately,
of course it is. But
my point is this: the community is. It absolutely is filtered. It's just filtered by parties that are not
Oh,
that
I
are
agree with you.
like and
My point is that this is a problem that can't be attacked at the surface. This is my point.
Mhm.
And this is the problem that I you can't fix this. You don't win this war. And I'm going to say war. I'm not even going to say battle or fight. This is a war.
Mhm.
This is like a very much a light versus dark thing. You know, you don't win this war by being vocal. You don't.
No, but my problem is,
You win this war by being the best person you can be.
but how many people, being the best person that I can be, do I feed to the wood chipper in the name of giving Nazis a voice?
That's not your responsibility.
It is if I'm running the community.
But you're not running the community. You're running the community for Jump Rangers.
I
So
am.
okay, you're sure.
And
But
the answer to me is like, and all I'm saying is,
Mhm.
any given management team
Sure.
running any given communications platform of any type
Okay.
is accountable to the same question. And ultimately, the mistake that people make is in thinking about it as a community too late. And I think that probably happened with Twitter. They probably thought of it as an app first. Like, it was probably a bunch of tech bros who never even considered the human element until it started to show itself. And
Well,
by that,
we know for certain that was how Facebook started.
and
So
ultimately, by the time they started taking those things into account, things had gotten so sauced up and mixed up that they and we know where Facebook has gone with those allegiances and their business model. Like like they had rationalized so much by the time the Russians started offering them money that, like, there was no reason not to take that money. It had already dissolved
right,
in the pudding,
right.
right? So so these tools do get appropriated. And the question we have to ask is the appropriation of these tools by bad actors acceptable? And is the influence that that appropriation has on our
I don't
society?
I don't think you can stop it.
I think you can, and I've seen enough evidence on scales on the Blizzard scale. I've seen
Let
enough.
me let me rephrase that statement. I don't think you can stop it with any kind of expediency. It is not the kind
No,
of thing where you pull the emergency brake and the car stops.
I agree. I also think, though, that making choices and fighting out the hard fights, saying, okay, I'm going to start introducing this and this. These are some new policies. I know you're not going to like them. Like, let's go. You put your helmet on. The minute you see the problem, you tackle the problem. And for me, like with Jump Rangers, for example, I'm advantaged in the sense that I'm in the beginning of this community. So more and more, I'm going to be surrounded by people who.
I gotta be honest though, because you
Mhm,
hit upon it earlier about the importance of choice,
mhm,
right?
mhm.
The moment you start taking choices away from people, you are the bad guy.
You're not taking choices away from people.
You are.
You're saying
You are.
here
You're
is.
taking away their choice to express something. And here's the problem, right? Is that if you start taking away choices, even if you're doing it for the right reasons, even if your messaging is correct and healthy and morally valid and all of that, it is so much easier
Mhm.
to be painted as the evil in the equation.
That it may
And
be, yes,
and the evil actors will do it
they will.
because that is how they play,
It is your
kind of thing.
This is absolutely
Yeah.
true, and that's got to
Yes.
be that's me being accountable for my own ethics. I promise you, at some
Yes.
point, like, all the big bad words that they use to describe liberal relationships with children will get used against me over the course of my career. All of them. I'm gonna, like, not because of anything I've done,
But
but
so, and here's the question, right? How will you react to that?
I think situationally. Um,
So I have a fairly I have expected also like I expect that this conversation will come back to bite me in the ass someday, kind of thing. To be honest, if I'm being perfectly honest. But you know, the truth is like so the tactic they always take is to take isolated sound bites out of context. That's the most
yes.
famous
Yep.
tactic in
Absolutely.
all of it forever.
Absolutely.
But the truth of the matter, and the worst thing you can do, and I say this from experience, okay? This is I have a leg up here on so many people because I was gaslit for 32 years straight. I understand better than probably almost everyone exactly how to defeat gaslighting. And the way you defeat gaslighting is by saying nothing. It
That
is by It is by acting in contrast.
My first priority as the administrator of my community, and I think this should be the case for many other people,
Yes.
is not necessarily to beat the gaslighters. My first priority is to protect the members of my community from harm.
So you and I fundamentally have different goals.
And
I do. This is the thing, okay?
because I'm dealing with kids. Like, let's take that.
I get it, and even with kids, I get it. I don't believe it's your job, regardless of who you are or what your position is.
I am providing them with a place to play. That is my job in this, and this is my job, right? This is what I'm doing.
It is up to their parents to determine whether or not it is an appropriate place for them to play.
I agree with you. It is their job to decide if I'm doing a good job.
With kids, it is on the onus is on the parents.
Mm-hmm.
With adults, the onus is on the individual.
But in my case,
it's not your job to protect anyone.
Well, it's my job to provide tools that are effective. Twitter stopped being an effective communication tool the moment it became impossible to communicate successfully about anything other than fascism and the goals of fascism, which at this point, it is relatively impossible to use that platform as a tool for anything other than promoting those ideals.
I disagree entirely.
I am no longer on Twitter because
I know I've never had a Twitter account. I'm not on. I mean, I have one, but I've never used it really.
I used mine all
I
the
see
time.
so much. I see so much done for other things that there's no way that that's true. There's no way that the fact of the matter is the fact that these other platforms exist where, like, you know, the only places that Trump really does social media things anymore and stuff like that, that tells you that what you've said is just not uniformly and, like, exhaustively true.
I think Trump is on Truth Social because he bought it and now he needs it to work. I think he would be back on Twitter after Elon Musk took over if he hadn't bought Truth Social in the meantime. I think Truth Social stock depends on the ability to have a conversation with Donald Trump.
But that it's the same thing as what we just talked about.
Well, what I'm saying is, I think
Nazism. So, like,
it is. I don't think there's.
This is my key though in this whole thing. Civilization and society cannot heal until individuals take responsibility for what they do themselves.
I agree.
It is not anyone's job. It is not your job to protect anyone.
Well, let's clarify.
Individuals have to get to it to protect themselves. What the job is, in my opinion, is informing people and giving people the choices and the opportunities to do what is best for them. And I'm gonna say this, that the reason we have so much hatred, the reason we have so much of the bad things, the fascism, the Nazism, even the platforms for those things, are the result of systemic oppression and indoctrination.
That's true.
If we get rid of the suppression, yes, it will take time. Yes, people will get hurt. People will get unjustly killed. Horrible things will happen. But my point is, you can't stop that from happening. No one can stop that from happening until we are all better, until we are all healthier. And we can't get healthier if we are still leaning into systems of control and oppression.
My point is
you can't do it.
My point is this. You don't treat an infection by throwing somebody in the sewer.
I know. It's not fair. Life is not fair.
And my point,
if it were me, I'm sure I would bitch and I would say that the system is unjust and it would be totally unfair. And I have lived in that. I have been made an undue victim of things that are just gross misunderstandings, things that I didn't do like punishments that way outweigh the crime kind of things, just because it was easier for other people. But no one can heal without those sacrifices.
What I want to point out is that people can make each other better if you give them the opportunity. And my job,
no one can make anyone do anything.
We're having a semantic problem here. But what I'm trying to say is that my job is not to give people information. My job is to give people systems of interacting with other people. who
Oh,
may
and
or
I
may.
say I think the only thing that matters is the truth.
I don't.
I think the only thing that matters, because here's the thing, that I very much believe like the truth will set you free, kind
Hmm.
of thing. Because if you when we talk about truth, right? If you are an individual who is open minded and can assess new information dispassionately without
Hmm.
ego, kind of thing. What do I believe fundamentally at my core? That all living things are inherently good, right? No one willfully chooses to do something to harm another human being
Hmm.
unless it has to do with their own needs, right? Like a perception, and I don't want to go through the whole philosophical argument that I have, but the point is like, if you are an omnipotent, omniscient being,
Hmm.
that literally, you're Thanos with the Infinity Gauntlet, you snap your fingers and you have anything you want,
Hmm.
right? But without the cost.
Hmm.
Are you ever going to pick an action that actually harms something else? You don't need to, because you can have whatever you want without harming anyone else. No one is going to pick the thing that causes harm to someone else. They're just going to pick the thing that they want that doesn't cause harm. Innately, at the very core essence of anyone's being. I'm not talking about, post indoctrination, post fear, post anxiety. I'm not talking about any of that. Once you start muddling the good with external bad things, that it changes.
My point
But
is that trauma doesn't heal without compassion.
and
And
trauma doesn't exist without the bad things. And that's my point. If there are no bad things, there's no trauma. And I'm not trying to sit here and saying like, oh, like a utopia where, it's only good. No, I understand. You have to have bad things in order to appreciate the good things. But my point is that the mean regression of like moral relativism for all of humanity trends up for the side of good. It doesn't trend down. Because if it trended down, we already wouldn't be. We would have all destroyed ourselves a long time ago.
my point is just that, it's not a bad thing to give people the opportunity to express themselves and find the good in each other, as
I agree.
opposed to feeding them. And giving them that opportunity means creating an environment where that's possible. And if you're creating an environment where that's possible, you might have to take responsibility for the things that exist in that
I
environment.
don't think there's any problem in acknowledging the creation of an environment, a specific environment, in order to, hopefully influence behavior in
And
in in,
and
a, in
any
any way,
environment,
whether it be a
any
good way
environment,
or a bad way.
any environment is that. Any environment that we create
But
is that.
but my caveat to that is that there does need to be an acknowledgement that an environment created like that is different from objective truth.
And I think the fact that Jump Rangers is fiction, like, immediately establishes that acknowledgement. At the same
Oh,
time,
sure.
like,
But
in the
all I'm saying is that, like, look, I'm all about trying to change the world. I'm trying to change the world, right?
Mhm.
Like, we're all trying to change the world, but we have to admit, and this is a hard thing for so many people to do. It's like, we're not changing the world because we think that we know what's best for the world.
Right.
We're we the only reason you're changing the world is because you think that you understand something fundamentally about the world that other people don't, and you are trying to illuminate them. That's what it is. It's so if you want to talk about creating the safe environment, that's great. That's wonderful. Do it. I encourage it. But understand that it is your vision.
Oh,
It's
absolutely.
it's not the objective
And
vision.
and what I'm saying is, if everyone pursued
Uh-huh.
their vision of what's best that they have to contribute, if everyone did that, then I think we would see a rapid acceleration in the upward
No,
trend.
that's currently what's happening though.
I disagree. I think that there are a lot of people making profound compromises to their vision and their ethics and what they know to be right
But
in the
they think that you're right. They do that, but they think that's because that's the way.
correct. And my
And
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 and setting
but
the
this is the
example,
point.
setting
This
the
is why we
example.
have to illuminate the truth. This is why I say the truth will set you. They think it's the way, but the truth is it's not the way,
And
right? And if we could shine that's not the way, then you give them the opportunity to discover for themselves that what they're doing isn't the way. And that is the key to sustainable change.
And going
Inception.
back to your point,
Yeah.
about what happens when Jump Rangers does inspire enough excitement that um that that I become the next it guy for like for tabloid Republican whatever. You see what I'm
Sure.
saying? Like
Yeah.
like I become the next Pizzagate. You know what I'm saying? When that happens to me, like my
But what you
plan
don't, right? But oh yeah, go ahead. Sorry, I'm not going to interrupt you. Yes, please go ahead. Tell me your plan.
my plan is to take that fight. Like my plan is to go ahead and let people see that, like, yes, this is happening. Yes, this is the consequence of me doing what I did. Yes, they promised a war and they brought a war. You see what I'm saying? Correct.
Okay.
And I'm still going. Or
As
maybe
long as you don't fight it on their terms.
no, that's ridiculous because they are, like you
You
said, they're
can't,
gaslighters. They're going to try and get
right.
you're 100%
But
right.
that's my point, right? They're gaslighters, right? What you have to do is be deaf to it and persevere. That's my point. You have to be deaf to it and persevere. And this is why I don't think Twitter is really as big of a problem as people make it out to be. The problem isn't Twitter. The problem is people being unwilling to not respond to the gaslighters.
Or to respond, and I think Kamala Harris has the right tact too. Like they're coming at her with, "What about this? What about that?" And she's like, "That's weird and it's gross. Let's talk about the economy." Like
yes, yes. It's like yeah, I hear what you're saying, but that's not me, right? The problem is when you engage with the accusations, when you engage with the evil people,
don't dive in good faith in a logical,
breathe life into what they are into that vitriol.
Don't have the argument they're trying to have with you. Don't.
This is why I don't think letting Twitter be Twitter or X, sorry, is as egregious and reprehensible as people make it out to be, because the problem isn't Twitter. The problem is how people engage with it.
The problem is that the only place people have to learn how to engage with Twitter is on Twitter. That's the problem. If people walked in there with the tools,
don't agree. I mean, I'm sure that I'm going to say that's true, certainly to an extent. I don't think that's true exclusively, though, because it's not the only platform. Right?
No, but it is the place.
There is still Facebook. There is still Instagram. There's still, what do we have Threads now in the metaverse, and there's Reddit.
But
and look,
the
we can say what we want. There are really good places on Reddit.
There are the algorithms in those systems, or the methods of controlling them. Prevent
the algorithms are a problem.
So Twitter is the one place where you're likely to come into contact with people that aren't reflecting your own views as readily. Even on Reddit, like you're interested in a certain subreddit, it's going to be a community.
Well, we should all very much be exposed to views and opinions that are not our own, because confirmation bias is like one of the most addictive things in the world.
I absolutely agree, but we need to do it in a good faith.
And that's the key. It has to be it needs to be a debate, not an argument. That's the difference, kind of thing.
And Jump Rangers is a vehicle
what we're doing, kind of thing.
And it is. And Jump Rangers is a vehicle for certain aspects of that conversation and not others, because of what it is. And that's fine. Those certain aspects will get eliminated in that conversation in a safe space where people can be who they are. And I'm not going to sit here and let you question whether or not this kid who says that they're trans shut up. You're out. Like, I told you up front. Like, let's not invalidate anyone. There's rules. You know what I mean? And I made it very clear what the consequences of violating these rules are, and you decided to test me. Like, welcome to your...
I'm trying to think. I'm not disagreeing. Right? And I do think, bad actions need to be punished. Bad actions, not bad actors. There's a difference.
Yes.
But I'm also wondering if there's another way to handle it.
Not early on. Not early on. Not in the
not early. No, not early. I mean, I'm talking about like once you get past the critical mass stage.
At that point, it becomes a conversation with the audience, and I'll say, "Hey, what do you guys think?" Like, because
I mean, I think that again. Look, the Romans were clearly like terrible, for many things, but there was something about the kind of expunging of the worst of the worst's existence, right? That like there is something to that, I think, where you know, and we talk about, oh, like, well, just ban people, ban IPs and stuff like that. And it's like that, yes, but that only deals with the problem on it doesn't deal with that only deals with a symptom, right? It doesn't deal with the illness.
I don't necessarily, what it deals with, to me,
Yeah.
where I come from, and what I want from social media platforms, it takes away the tools of systemic oppression a little more readily, and it opens the door to an
but it becomes systemic oppression.
I disagree. I think that Germany wrestled with this problem, and it is okay to censor fascists. That's just it.
But again, because that's a community. That is not a global thing. It is not something that ensconces the entirety of the human race.
Nothing does, though. Like, nothing does.
Of course, no, of course, social media platforms do. Absolutely, social media platforms do.
And religions do.
And religions do. Yes, very much. That's a good point. So, Catholicism, number one. So
you know,
but individual nations, and this is an important distinction, right? The nation, right? I'm sorry. That's the improper term. The proper term is state. The individual states do not have that kind of global influence.
And at the same time, to me, it's not a question.
Despite what America wishes it was, right? Like,
if you have that global influence, use it consciously, is my point. If you have the global influence, say, here's what this community is, here's what it stands for, and it doesn't necessarily need to be it stands for freedom. I'm not even saying. But it
needs global things need to act on behalf of humanity rather than any in specific community.
And the problem
now sometimes there's overlap. Yes, of course.
The problem is that so many institutions in humanity do not act on the interest of humanity.
Oh, of course not. Neither capitalism nor communism speak to that.
So why not institute the strictest Islamic practices on Twitter? Why not put community service? Women are not allowed to use Twitter. Would actually open the door to huge audiences. If you just banned women from Twitter, it would serve so many people in this world and give them a communications platform
that's a soundbite for your future haters.
Yes, it absolutely is. And this is, of course, an example of what not to do.
Right.
Like, my point is, that's not the choice that Twitter made, and yet.
Well, you know why that's not the choice that Twitter made, right?
Because
it's less profitable.
It's less profitable, and ultimately, we have to decide how we do what we do matters. I understand that this was a bunch of guys.
It's just that to me that's as simple as it's less profitable. There are more women who will use Twitter than people that they would gain by being in support and favor of banning women from Twitter.
I don't know about that. I think if you look at the populations of like China and like there are huge populations out there where if we just leaned into a certain vision of, or even allowed women to be chased off of Twitter and abused off of Twitter, if we just allowed that, like,
I gotta be honest with you here for a second. I have more faith in humanity than that.
I think that we're dealing with an analogous problem here. I think that the problem that we are discussing is analogous in some very real ways. I think that the way that Black people are treated on Twitter, I think that the way that transgender people are treated on Twitter, and I think that the way that various other demographics are treated on Twitter is exactly the same as what I'm describing. And I think that systems have I would not be surprised to find that there are actually systemized approaches to managing Twitter. If there's like a whole office somewhere in Russia just dedicated towards driving people off of Twitter and abusing them until they leave, just full of KGB agents on the payroll, getting this job done. It would
hear me out. Well, for starters, it's now the FSB. It's not the KGB anymore. But like, you know, in any case,
it's the KGB.
No, I have more faith in humanity than that, and I can distill this down into a very simple thing, which is that. And I know this is true just from conversations I've had with people whom I trust very much, especially like my friend who was like, I had the argument is like, just because you have racist thoughts or you say racist things doesn't make you a racist, doesn't make you a terrible person kind of thing, you know? But the conversation I've had with him, which is also like, look, sometimes what we know how we feel about something, right? Deep down, we have a sense of, we have the moral compass, right? We all have the moral compass, and a lot of times people make internal sacrifices with their moral compass in order to be part of a community, because again, we have all been indoctrinated to believe that if you're not part of the system, you are a problem. And so while you say that there, and I'm not sitting here saying that misogyny isn't rampant everywhere in the world. Of course it is. I mean, shit, my favorite country in the world is still like, the biggest problem they have is that they're like one of the most misogynistic countries in the world still. I'm not going to say it, but you and I know which country I'm talking about. But here's the thing, right? There's a difference between misogynistic action and misogynistic intent. And yes, of course, actions speak louder than words. I am on that page. But I am not on the page of words, and in this case, intent, being worthless. Right? It's not that actions are the only thing that matter. Intent matters. And a large part of the problem is that, again, that's another thing we've been indoctrinated, is that your thoughts, the things you think, the things you internalize are irrelevant. And that's false. Because that, at its core, is identity. And so it makes sense that that's what we've been taught, because a large part of the system of control is to kind of get people thinking that their own autonomy and their own identity is worthless.
The problem that I have is that the way things work in a, like the free speech argument, as it's presented by the right, creates a system of management where the only fresh air in the conversation goes to people who are abusing systems of power. The only opportunity to be heard, really, unless you...
Right. It's people who have platforms, and the way you get platforms is by abusing systems of power. Typically.
Or not just people who have platforms, but people who are reciting the party line and who can get the likes from the platforms and this and that. Like, there's like...
that to me, that's still... If you can get the likes, that you have a platform.
There's no opportunity to teach or to engage, because it really is just a giant bullying session. It's just whoever...
because you can't teach and engage someone by force. Whereas you can bully someone with force.
That's exactly right. So the force wins out on these platforms unless we make the force systemically disempowered. The force itself. And there are certain things that you can police.
I don't think that. I just don't think that's possible.
I absolutely think.
I don't think you can take the power away from platforms. How?
Listen to disenfranchised people when they tell you how. Black people will tell you how. Gay people will tell you how. They'll say, get rid of these words. And just listen and do it and see if it works. Because we're sitting here from a certain perspective, but there are people out there screaming how to solve that exact problem. Women will tell us how to make sexism. They will tell us what to do. And all we have to do is be willing to try.
I just don't believe that you ever get there with new, different systems of control.
It's not about just try it. It's not about, we're not trying to get there, capital TH. We're not trying to get there. We're not trying to get to the finished utilitarian society, right? We're talking about the deconstruction of systems.
That's where I'm trying to.
No, I know you are. I know you are. But what I'm saying is deconstructing systems of power is part of that process. We are talking about the Marxist moment where people in power, because right now but it doesn't work. That is actually perpetuating the system. It's preventing the deconstruction. What we have to do as the bourgeoisie in any particular equation in which we are the bourgeoisie, you see what I'm saying? Any particular system of power where we have that...
Why do you feel like we are part of the bourgeoisie? That is a little bit odd to me, because I very much feel like I'm still part of the proletariat.
We're white guys. So in the racial conversation, we're the bourgeoisie.
We have privilege. Absolutely, we have privilege.
But
we don't. It doesn't. Just because we're white doesn't mean that we have power.
Yes, it does. Systemically, we do. Systemically,
no, we have advantages,
and those advantages are power in certain circumstances. Here's the point that I'm trying to make: privilege is power in the right circumstances always. And ultimately, this Marxist conversation isn't just, I'm not just talking about the working class here. I'm talking about any privileged relationship. I'm talking about absolutely
Privileged relationships exist in
yeah,
all dynamics. It's just a
correct.
matter of how much weight they have in like the overall scheme kind of thing.
Or in the
That kind
specifics
of
of
goes back to the N word, right? Like,
yep, yep.
black people can use that word. That is
Yep.
that is a privilege they have amongst themselves. And
It's
I'm
I
not
don't
saying
see
that's a
it
bad thing.
I don't
Like,
see it as a
look,
privilege, and I'll tell you why. Because
well, you're right because
yes,
it wasn't created by them, right?
like
Yeah,
so
yeah.
racism is real, but
Yes, absolutely.
you can't be racist to a white person. Everyone is racist, but you can't be racist to a white person
Hmm.
because you do not have 10,000 years of systemic oppression backing up your every move. It's not about, there's a difference between being racist and being prejudiced.
Well, I mean, I would say that you can be racist towards white people. I just don't. I would question, the efficacy of it, kind of thing.
No, 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 because you
You
actually
know.
need, the racism comes from the system of power that's been established through institutional slavery, through all these things, through X and Y and Z, like through
Oh, you're saying because white people created it, it's right.
because
Okay,
there
I think
is
I think
no
I see what you're
there
saying. I think I
there
see what you're saying.
there we haven't had our trail of tears. We haven't had a systemic.
Well, here I have to ask, right? Because like when we say white people,
Mhm.
right? Like, look, I'm culturally Jewish, even if
Okay.
I didn't get bar mitzvah and I didn't go to temple, right? Like, my father's family, as far back as we can trace, was Ashkenazi Jewish,
Yes.
and I'm white.
So let's discuss. So
That
this
doesn't mean that the Jewish people haven't been
no,
egregiously repressed and
no,
tormented
no.
and horrible things throughout all of history.
And that
In
torment hasn't influenced your family economically or all these other
right,
different ways.
but
Like
but also like look at the genocides in the Balkan Peninsula in the 90s, Serbia, Kosovo, Macedonia, and stuff like.
yep,
It's not like I
the word you're
and
looking for is
even
intersectionality. The word you're looking for is intersectionality. I
I mean
I'm a
I
disabled
I,
man.
I look and I'm just like other than like and no offense to anyone who's listening, but other than like the British,
Hmm.
has there been a single nation, and I'm using the political term of nation, where nation is a group of people who come together, does not necessarily mean they have territory, which is the definition of state.
Yep.
But has there been any nation in human history that did not eventually experience genocide on the victim side, kind of thing?
Spain. Um, like the United States.
No, I'm pretty sure the Spanish got it at the hands of the Germanic tribes way back in the Middle Ages, kind of thing.
Well, but here's the larger point here, Greg, is that the
Yeah.
systems of power that we utilize today are built on the systems of power that were built during the slave trade.
Which were built on systems of power during, the British colonization expansion and stuff like that. And
Yep.
it just goes on and on. You can trace it all the way back. You probably trace it all the way back as far as Babylon, sorry. But like,
I am making the point that baked into our definition of wealth, our definition of justice, our definition of all these things
right.
is massive amounts of institutional inequity that we take for granted because of
Oh, well, yes, there's no argument for that,
and
of course.
and the degree to which we experience that inequity has everything to do with where we're privileged and where we're not, which is a tapestry. Every person is a tapestry. There's a lot of black guys out there who are guys. There's a lot of like black women out there who are cis women who like there's all kinds of shit going on. There's a lot of gay people. Like I I am as waspy as it gets. I was
Uh,
also hit in the head with a sword 13 years ago and like suffered a massive traumatic brain injury and was very visibly disabled for the better part of a decade and have lived with the consequences of that disability.
so,
Like
I mean,
that's so I am
where
privileged.
there is a degree of duality to all of this,
100%
right?
there is.
Because I mean, I you and I agree on this, right? Like individualism, autonomy, like identity is paramount,
Yes.
right? Like nothing functions without. But at the same time, it is unquestioningly selfish and egotistical and it really a really poor way to live one's life, to live in such a way that only ever prioritizes the self, kind of thing.
Absolutely
Despite
true.
despite the self being paramount, and
Yep.
it is. We
Yep.
agree. And so really, and this is now I'm gonna have to go like very shortly, but like, you know, where does the line get drawn between the community and the individual? Because individuals have to take responsibility for their own actions. They have to.
Yep.
Community cannot take responsibility for an individual's action.
No.
That is a horribly misguided approach.
But the community leadership can take responsibility for the community leadership's response to the individual's actions. That is absolutely.
This is where I think I'm not saying I disagree, but I think this is not as clear cut as that. Because again, I think only an individual leader can take responsibility for an individual's actions. I do not believe that a community, like a board of directors or whatever, a leadership community, something that is decided by committee, can take responsibility for an individual. And this is why, oh God help me for saying this live, this is why I kind of believe in like the benevolent dictatorship a little bit. And better phrase as like the benevolent monarch kind of thing. Because I do not actually think
I understand why you think
that any system of control can function in a democratic structure. Because the problem is individuality, which is like a wonderful thing. We need individuality. It's good. But the problem is that no two people can ever actually fully agree on something.
Let's bring it back to companies. Let's bring it back to companies. Any given company is providing a product or a service.
Yes.
That's inclusive of Twitter. They're providing a product or a service.
But the individuals still matter. We can't just discount the individual.
I'm not saying we should. But what I am saying is the function of that leadership is different than the functioning of a government. I think that the fact that governments have to reach a consensus is good.
You just hit the nail on the head on the big problem here. Is that companies have lost sight of that and are now governed as if they were governments because of shareholders.
I think the stock market is one of the worst things that has ever happened to our economy. I absolutely believe that. I think I will never work for shareholders because, Greg, I trust my judgment. I want to surround myself with other people. We can trust each other's judgment and do what we need to do. Like that's
the shareholder asset. You know what? I have never had this thought before, but I think there is merit to it. I think that the shareholder idea actually does only work for government. I do not think it can work for a for-profit business.
Name one company that ever went public and got better.
Because they went public?
After they went public.
I mean, you wouldn't. My knee-jerk answer would be Netflix, but I'm sure you know more about Netflix than I do.
It is always, as soon as it works, the job of selling stock means making your company appeal to more people today than it appealed to yesterday. It is not the same thing as doing your job well. And ultimately, at a certain point, the only thing left to do, because once your company has gotten as appealing as it can get, the only thing you can do is start diversifying at a certain point. That's the only option you have left to increase your
going public is a risk mitigation thing. You're diluting risk from specific, like, again, angel investors, typically seed investors, and spreading it across the people.
Yep.
And you get the added bonus of the fact that by doing that, very frequently the valuation goes up, and so you make a lot more money.
Yes.
Kind of thing.
But there's other ways to make that money.
That's the thing. It is, and this goes back to my earlier point about we're looking for easy ways to validate ourselves while maintaining status quo. Going public is absolutely a way to do that.
You have put your finger on one of the things, and I've worked in private equity for about 10 years in the film industry. You've heard my rants about the insecurity, like huge amounts of the problem that I have with the film industry right now come from the fact that so many of it, I'm not even going to get into it. This is a whole other conversation. But at the end of the day, yes, I do think the stock market is a huge ass problem, 100%. And I think that anyway,
You're right. I think that actually the problem with the stock market can be summarized in one sentence, which is that the stock market is a vehicle which inherently destroys individuality.
and and
And it
and
does.
and accountability.
Well, I mean, yes, because when you start again, when you start blurring the lines between individuals, there's nowhere to point blame ever.
I
So,
want I
yeah.
want my audience to be able to hold me accountable. Like,
And not only does the audience have to be able to hold you accountable, you have to be able to hold the audience accountable. And the audience has to be able, and part of this
which is
also
where my
is
community
that
guidelines come from. Yes,
when
yes,
when
yes.
but when accountability starts getting blurred like that, individuals lose the ability to hold themselves self-accountable.
And that's where having built
Yeah.
like clear lines of communication and the ability for people to help each other willingly and easily without all the fucking pain and suffocating, like, if like that's why I take responsibility for the kinds of communication that we are going to be having in Jump Rangers, for example, and why we
I
manage our
wonder I wonder if that makes stock buybacks actually morally defensible. That's a really
Greg,
weird sentence.
Greg, I understand what you're saying, and I think the answer is maybe, but I think we just jumped the shark. So let's bring it back briefly to
Yeah,
civilization.
civilization. We got to wrap this up because I got to get
I
going.
think we put our hands
But
on it. I think it's a series of stories,
well,
season
this
by
is
season.
civilization. This is
It
what
is.
I mean,
It is. It is.
it's the cinematic portrayal of everything that we've just talked about, kind
So
of thing.
I think going back to what I
Yeah.
said, I think if any given season you have different nations, if you have at least on the most structural basic level, two
Yeah.
nations trying to establish supremacy over X in some way to get what they need, right? And within that civilization, you have at least one character organizing or doing the job of moving forward with their understanding of the totality of it, one person moving forward with the military supremacy to control it, and one person trying to establish diplomatic relations to bring everybody along. If in each you have in within the context of whatever, you can have countless. You start at the beginning, you start with the Bronze Age, like you said, and you work your way through. You can have some amazing, like neo alternative history stuff going on. I think you do the obvious thing. You save, like, for example, Aztec civilization in your back pocket until the late game. Hang on to that. Like, go
Right.
ahead and give them the Wakanda. Do it. Like,
That's yeah. I feel like that should be the Wakanda right
yes,
there, kind of thing.
fucking do it. Like, start with
I do vehemently say that you have to end on a high note. You can't end on the
okay.
doomsday clock is at 11:59:59 because if you're going to do something like this, you need to give people a roadmap to success, not just a warning
I
of how
agree
to
with you.
avoid
I, I
failure.
I absolutely give that to
Yeah.
you. And I also think the idea that you had of, like, allowing these characters in the early stages to establish these systems of power and these systems of
Yes.
iconography that that get reused in different ways over the course of the evolution of these. But
Well, we get to see how the systems themselves evolve, kind of
but
thing.
the cool thing about switching places and dealing with different cultures in every single season is
Yeah.
that you end up watching. Let's say the first season is about Russia. Let's say it's about Ivan the Terrible. Let's just say,
Sure.
right? And then you get to go and see how that iconography is getting used from the outside looking in from a different culture at that point. You get to see that culture's influence on whatever is going on, like, in the future, and you'll see those threads come back around by switching around from the outside, like, in the context of this other government's attempts to establish supremacy over Y. I think it's going to be
Yeah,
really
yeah, yeah.
I think it's going to be really cool, and you'll be able to make inferences.
I think at the end of the day, it probably just ends up feeling like a Game of Thrones, but like, I don't think there's anything wrong
Well,
with that.
first of all, I think it's going to be pulpier than Game of Thrones. I think it's
Oh,
going
I
to,
mean, yes, but I think it will kind of have that same kind of popular feel to it.
maybe
You know, maybe not Game of Thrones, maybe like House of Cards.
the
You
fact that
know,
you're
or
switching from civilization to civilization in every season, I
yeah,
think is going to make every new season an exploration of
yeah,
alternative history that those games didn't have access to. And I think that it also makes it very easy to recast the show every season or use the same cast if you want to because
I think it also it gives you an opportunity to do something which I don't actually recall ever seeing in any film or television ever, which is that like part of the game, and this would need to exist in part of the series, is the decimation and or rather the annihilation of certain
cultures.
nations, certain
Yeah.
cultures at points in time, and also then like the assimilation and cultural appropriation, right? Because it's not
Oh
just
yes.
it's not just something gets wiped off the face of the map.
Those people get put somewhere. There's things that
It gets
happen. Like,
it gets borged,
yeah.
kind of thing.
Yep.
And like that's part of it too. And so you
Yes.
get to see this really thing where it is almost like you're playing the Hunger Games
I think this
with
is. I think this
with
is.
nations.
I think this. I think this is the pitch.
Yeah.
I think this is where you go with it.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. I mean, 'cause there's some really powerful things too. Because also then you also get to create, and look, audiences still need drama. They still need entertainment, and this does still need to be entertaining. You get all of a sudden that sense of like we don't know who's going to survive this whole thing.
Yep.
Kind of.
Yep.
And that is also very much, you know, we're holding up a mirror to reality.
Yep. Yep.
You know, we as Americans are like, oh no, we're the superpower. We're gonna be around forever. Like, dude, America has been around for fewer than 300 years.
Yep.
And how long did the Ottoman Empire last for?
Yep.
How long did the Persian Empire last for?
Yep.
Some of the dynasties in China.
Yep. Yep.
Like
Chinese history is thousands of
we
years.
could get to 100 years from now, and America might not even exist as a country anymore. Kind of thing. I don't hope that that's true. I definitely don't hope that that's true. But like that could very well be true.
Yep.
The map gets redrawn all the time.
Yep.
Kind of thing.
Absolutely.
And we got to not forget we're pride. We got to let go of pride.
Yes.
Pride is such a thing. It's not about any individual. It's not about me. It's not about you. It's about all of us.
And what we do for each other. It's about service.
Yes. Yes.
Yep.
And it's about service that honors the self.
Yeah.
Service to others that honors the self. That's really
probably
good
that's probably why.
it.
Now that you've said that, I understand why we're friends now. Having heard you say that, because I know that's how I approach, as you know, screen development. That's always like that's exactly like we're not ignoring what you want to bring to the table. We're finding ways of respecting what you bring to the table without compromising in any way what we give to the collaboration. Like that's the whole thing. It's like I'm never trying to make a movie that I would make when I'm working with someone else. I'm trying to help them make their movie and I'm trying to get them to help them make the movie.
See, I don't even when I work on other people's projects, I don't even say it's not about making their project better. It's about making the project better.
To me, it's always about like films come from the spaces in between people, and so when I see it, and when I see,
and that's why it can't. No one person can ever claim ownership.
That's out. I gotta let my wife in the door.
And I gotta run, dude. This has been a blast.
This has been epic.
Yeah, I can talk about this stuff. Next week. What are we doing next week? Because it's my turn to pick, right?
Yes. I've got a list of recommendations that we made. If you want me to read through it real quick.
You know what? Fuck it. Let's just do Oregon Trail.
Okay.
That just sounds. You said that, and my inner child just like it was like in Christmas morning.
Okay.
I was an Oregon Trail 2 person. Okay. I wasn't, originally on the old Windows 3 or not.
My wife is literally standing outside in the heat.
All right,
so Oregon Trail it is.
This has been a blast. Thank you so much. I will talk to everyone next week.
Don't be a stranger, Ranger. Thank you for watching.
Take care.